2 days and 38 minutes after we originally intended.
That is true. That is true. Let me just refresh this on my screen so I know for a fact that we are live and broadcasting to the world. Apparently there are 3 people watching. Sound check.
To the world.
Yep. We're coming through. Yes.
Cool.
All right. Oh, by the way, is it okay if I call you by your name, or do you want to stay anonymous? I should probably say that.
That's okay. It's already too late for anonymous. Everyone knows my first name.
Everyone knows your name. All right. So Jake, cool. It's Jake, right?
Yes, it is.
Sweet. Okay, it's Ramsey Dewey, all the way from Shanghai, China, here with Jake from Armchair Violence. We are doing a live stream together with YouTube's sweet new function, Go Live Together, which gave us some technical difficulties, but we have overcome. Here we are. So, right before the live stream, we were chatting a little bit. So, when we were experiencing some technical difficulties the other day, and I was trying to set this up, and it didn't go through. I ended up just doing a live Q&A by myself. One of the guys in the comments left a very angry comment, and he said, "Why are you doing a live stream with Armchair Violence? I hate that guy." And apparently
I have passionate haters, man.
He disagrees with you on some assertions you made about knife defense or something, which is a crazy thing because I think, honestly, anytime people make assertions about knife defense, they're almost always wrong anyway. So
usually,
it's just a messy business.
Technically, my video was on knife offense.
Okay.
I haven't even done knife defense yet. I did a video on how to stab people.
Yeah, that's something that you can definitely speak authoritatively about. There are definitely more efficient ways to stab people than there are to
100%.
stop the stabbing. You know, speaking of stabbing, so I was thinking the other day, do you remember, did you see the what was it called? The Ultimate Self-Defense Championship?
Yes. Oh yeah, I watched that.
Yeah, they're apparently recording another one, season 2 this week. So they had the knifey, stabby one, where they do that drill that is often done in self-defense schools, where you wear a shirt and and the attackers have a marker and try to mark up the shirt, and the score is based up on how many marks are on the shirt at the end of the day. And I thought, man, if we are gamifying self-defense, this is something I should have thought of before I had actually done this. But I was dealing with an injury, so I wasn't thinking clear. So I should have just pulled guard, because none of those guys know anything about guard passing, and just kept my legs out in front of me, because it didn't matter if they marked up the legs, just the shirt. Anyway, that would be a terrible thing to do in real life, because you'd get your femoral artery chopped up and your feet chopped up. But then again,
well,
maybe.
Honestly, like, your femoral arteries are mainly on the inside of your legs, and they're up on your thighs. And like, if they're instinctively hitting your legs, they're probably just going to catch you in the shin, which means, like, it's not fun, but you're going to live. So honestly, like, if you are done for, like, if you're just completely outgunned, I would almost say just, like, using your feet to push a guy away. I've seen dumber options. Let's say that, because I saw a guy do that in a video, because I'm trying to watch more videos on knife stuff, and it didn't not work.
Yeah. So Jack Dempsey wrote a book for the U.S. military back in the day. It's today sold under the title "How to Fight Tough," and it's like old books. It's not highly illustrated, but there are some illustrations, more than the average book back then. And for the knife defense section, there was a drop kick, like a sliding drop kick to the legs, that he would teach, followed by, like, basically a sweep from an open guard type of thing. And I looked at that and I thought, that seems very, very counterintuitive to knife fighting. But the more I think about it, maybe if you got, like, heavy combat boots, that might work. Oh, sweet. Jess D is in the chat, sending a super chat. Hey, thank you very much. Good to see you here, Jess. So, yeah, on
Also,
Onward and
I
out.
saw one comment that said no Batman shirt. I'll have them know this is a Batman shirt. The logo has just 90% worn off.
Oh, oh yeah. So, yeah, somebody in the previous chat said, I can't wait to see Ramsey, Dewey, and Armchair Violence together. The superhero t-shirts will be epic. So, I don't know if Chun-Li counts as a superhero, but
It's close
definitely
enough.
a close enough. Close
I
enough.
need to I need to fight martial arts journey for the title of best Batman fan in the YouTube martial
Hmm.
arts sphere.
Yes, you do. Yes, you
Yeah,
do.
either a fight or a trivia contest. I'll go for either.
Awesome. All right. So, for those of you listening, we're going to conduct an interview here, and we will, of course, address all super chats at the end of the podcast, and we'll take some questions toward the end of the discussion as well. So, yeah. So, Jake,
Yeah.
I think your channel is pretty awesome, and I know you have a fair share of haters because I've read some of the comments, and some people, it doesn't matter what kind of content you put out there. It really doesn't. You will get an alarming amount of hate if you are a YouTuber, especially
Yeah.
if you are a martial arts YouTuber. And especially if you're a nice looking, clean cut sort of guy, such as yourself, people will just make assumptions. So, can you tell us a little bit about your background in martial arts, self defense, whatever it is that you do?
It's I've mainly been MMA focused. I started like 11 years ago, but I've been like very inconsistent on actually training it. Most of my like actual knowledge and understanding from this is not from like actual lessons from people in person. It's mainly from being curious and Googling things and trying to expand my knowledge base as much as I can over the past like 11 years. And that's where
Okay.
most of my knowledge comes from. I have no formal qualifications in anything related to martial arts or violence in any way. I just Google a lot.
Okay. And I imagine that probably rubs a lot of people the wrong way. Like, you do not hold a belt under the proper hierarchy. And yeah. But at the same time, one thing I love about your channel is that you call out a lot of the nonsense in the martial arts industry and the self defense industries, in the combat sports industries. I was just watching one of your videos. I don't remember the title, but you bring up some very salient and important points, basically, and it's something I talk about a lot as well. Combat sports training compared to other sports training, compared to say basketball, football, etc., where they take a very scientific approach to it because there's a lot of money on the line in those sports, and they want to have the best results possible. In combat sports, it's pretty much bro science and guesswork in most gyms.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I'm sure you were watching my chin conditioning video, is what that sounds like.
maybe I think it was about like something like how to make a good martial art or something like that. Let me just
Oh,
look
maybe,
up.
yeah, maybe it was that one.
Yeah, so it's a topic that comes up again and again. So this is something I would like to discuss about the problems with combat sports training. So a lot of people will say, look at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and say, well, hey, Royce Gracie was successful in UFC 1 and 2 and most of UFC 3. So Jiu-Jitsu is the way to go, right? And then you go to most Jiu-Jitsu classes, and how is it that they train? Have you been to a Jiu-Jitsu class?
Yes, many.
Okay, many. All right. What were most of them like? Could you like give me a quick outline of what the class format was like?
Yeah, most of them, like in what actually happened in the class, we did warm-ups, which pretty much everyone can keep up with, and then we drilled like between 3 and 5 moves with absolutely zero resistance, and
Okay.
then we rolled.
Okay, that sounds pretty typical at like
That's
95% of all jiu-jitsu gyms.
yes,
They do some warm-ups, they shrimp
yes.
across the floor, maybe some push-ups, whatever. And yeah, they drill the technique of the day, maybe a few of them, and then they roll, right? Would you say that's an optimal way to train?
Not even close.
Okay, I would agree, but why not? Why not? What?
I would say there's a lot of things wrong with it. One of my personal pet peeves is so many classes spend like 10 to 15 minutes on warm-ups or exercises.
Mhm.
And like, dude, if I'm in here for an hour, all right, I can exercise on my own time, right?
Mhm.
I can stretch before class starts. Teach me things. Let's flip and go. You're just eating into my time here. I don't know how many other people think that. That's one of my personal pet peeves. But the big thing to me is that we do drills with no resistance and we roll and we don't do anything in between.
Yes.
Most BJJ gyms don't do anything in between. And like,
Yeah.
yeah, the way I try and do drills now, just with my partner, like I'll do it once or twice with no resistance if I haven't done the move before. And once like I kind of get how this move works, I say, give me a little bit of resistance, like a little bit. And they do that, and then I can't do the move anymore. Like 5% resistance makes the move fall apart. And then I figure it out and I make corrections and I get the move. I go, okay, a little bit more resistance. And we work up like that every time I get the move smoothly once or twice, I add resistance. So like that kind of intermediate resistance training, kind of like scaling the resistance to what I can actually handle, it's way better for learning, at least for me, than the zero resistance drilling.
Yeah, and I would say you're not alone in that regard. I would say that that applies to almost everybody, right?
That's what I figured.
If you think about the classic drill the move, then spar format, right? You drill the move. How many times will that situation come up in sparring? Maybe not at all. Maybe once, maybe twice. And if you're trying it live for the first time against somebody resisting you completely, maybe somebody who is better at jiu-jitsu than you, how many times will you successfully complete the move in a live roll? Zero.
Yeah.
How many times do you need to successfully complete a move in order for that to stick into your muscle memory?
Depends on the
More than
person.
zero,
I
right?
need like but like that's actually a good question. Is like how many times do you need to legitimately do the move before you can call on it at any time in high resistance? Because
Mhm.
that's the issue. Like where if you're doing the drills that day, you've just been shown the move. You're primed to do the move. There are people helping you do the move. But like, are you going to retain that move 3 months from now when you're rolling? Almost certainly not, unless you do it a certain amount of times in a certain way to actually retain it. And
Yeah.
that's where like you need a certain amount of resistance. Like you need resistant drilling, you need positional rolling, and you need like those gamification problem solving tasks.
Mhm.
And those are all really,
100%.
really good ways to train that nobody does in like any class.
I know. Well, a few people, but again, it's like maybe 5% of
Yeah.
jujitsu instructors that I've personally visited. I've been to a lot of jujitsu gyms. So it's shocking that it's so rare to find because how can I put this? It's become a tradition, like the way a traditional martial art is taught. Let's say you go to a taekwondo class, what do? You do a warm up, maybe you do your forms, maybe you do Olympic style sparring, maybe you do some two-step self-defense nonsense. It depends, but there's generally some sort of format. They'll do it the way their instructor did it, the way their instructor did it, etc. And Brazilian jiu-jitsu has largely become that. But I love how you pointed out so many of them are missing the middle layer between sequencing a move and sparring. And the more of that we have, man, the better. A thought I've
Yeah.
had for a long time. I've been doing jujitsu for about 20 years now. And let me ask you this. How long does it take the average person to earn a black belt in Brazilian jiu-jitsu?
From what I've heard, obviously I do not have a black belt, but from what I've heard, it takes
Yeah.
about like 10 to 12 years if you're
Okay.
going fairly consistently.
Yeah, that's what most people say. Now here's
Yeah.
something I've been thinking. Should it take 10 to 12 years to earn a black belt in Brazilian jiu-jitsu to gain that level of competency? Because I started thinking, that seems really, really inefficient. And I know it's traditionally what's thought, but it seems really, really inefficient. And the more I train in jiu-jitsu, the more I realize that is an incredibly inefficient model of pedagogy, to just simply say, keep showing up for 12 years, and then eventually you'll get the skills. So
well, and this is, I think this comes down to also, what does having a black belt mean? Because for a lot of schools, it means you put a certain amount of time in. So for those schools, then like a black belt literally means you put in 10 to 12 years of effort. Then like, of course it would take 10 to 12 years of effort, because if you reduce that, you are inherently devaluing a black belt. But that's if we assume black belt means time invested. If we assume black belt means like actual skill on the mat, no, dear goodness, it should never take that long unless you just suck and you are just incredibly unathletic. That's the only reason it should ever take you that freaking long.
Yeah, man. It's often held up as a point of pride in the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu community to like, look how much longer it takes to earn a black belt in our art, as opposed to, say, Taekwondo, where you can get one in 5 years or less, or now they're handing them out to small children. So, but at the same time, again, the older I get, the more I realize the limiting factor in training is time. And if we are just sinking massive quantities of time for very little reward, that's not a good trade. So
yeah, but at the same time, like, it's a belt. So like, if you're sinking the same amount of time, if you are getting to a certain skill level, if you're getting a certain amount thing out of it in 5 years or 3 years, but you don't have a certain colored band around your waist yet, I don't care. Like, it's, as long as I'm getting what I want, I don't really care what belt I'm wearing. I can buy a black belt on Amazon. They're like $20. Like, if I really want one.
Even cheaper in China, man.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah. So we got a super chat, a question from NKS437, who says, what do you think of the constraints-led approach and small-sided games in training? I find I pick up stuff much faster that way. Okay. Any thoughts about that topic? Again, what do you think of the constraints-led approach and small-sided games in training? I find I pick up stuff much faster that way.
Yeah, that's better than what a lot of people currently do. There are downsides to it. And what I believe he's talking about is like, positional rolling, where you start in a certain position. If you leave that position, you just reset, or you start in a certain position, you're not allowed to do certain things. Or in a game situation, you have like an unusual different goal. Like when I took a few wrestling lessons, one of them was we had a towel hanging out the back of our shorts.
Okay.
And the goal was no longer taking down and pinning. It was getting the towel from the back of people's shorts.
Yeah.
And those kinds of things are great training. The downsides are, one, I've heard from coaches that when you do that in the adults classes, when you try and gamify things, it makes people feel condescended to, because they're like, I'm not a kid, I don't need games, which is unfortunate. Like, they should get over it. But also the other downside is you're going to, like, it's a matter of incentives, and you're going to adapt to whatever the incentive structure is. So I remember when I did that wrestling thing with the towel in the back of the shorts, I figured out an optimal strategy. Remember, this is a wrestling class. This is not a grappling class. If I sat down and let them come on top of me, my towel's now pinned to the ground, and I can reach around their back and get theirs.
Okay.
That is a terrible way to wrestle.
Absolutely.
I absolutely exploited the rule set of the game.
But it's a great way to gamify the system, yeah.
Yeah, it's a great way to game the system. So the problem is, like, no matter what you introduce, people will game the system. So, and you just have to account for that. So if you're doing the same gamified things over and over, people will learn to fight that way. That is what they will do, because that will be muscle memory. What you should use those games for is you should constantly cycle through different games with different objectives and different constraints, and like very rarely repeat them. Because then what you're training is not a certain way to accomplish a task. You're training problem solving, because they're constantly being hit with a new thing that they have to figure out. And they're like, oh, how can I exploit this rule set? And then how can I exploit this rule set? So you should be using those to make people uncomfortable with new constraints and new rules, and to make them problem solve. That's the big use of that.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. You know what that reminds me of?
What?
Tai Chi push hands competition. So push hands is supposed to be a drill. It's a game. It's not the actual martial art. It's just like a drill to teach a oddly specific skill set, like, you know, sensitivity to pushing and pulling. Yeah, exactly. And yet people have turned this into a competition to the point where they think this is what Tai Chi is. Tai Chi is to just try to push or pull the guy off balance. And it's like, no, I've told this story a bunch on my channel. I met a Tai Chi master who actually knew how to fight. And I sparred with him. I fought with him. He could fight, like really fight. He could slip punches. He could do throws and joint locks and cool stuff like that. And I was like, this is not push hands. This is not what has been advertised to me as what Tai Chi is. This is something radically different. This dude can fight. And so every time I see people like doing a Tai Chi push hands competition saying, this is Tai Chi, I'm like, that would be like, I don't know, if you had a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu tournament, except the objective was to see who could shrimp across the mat the fastest. That is what Tai Chi push hands is. So
now, this guy that did Tai Chi that could fight, had he only done Tai Chi, or had he cross-trained?
He cross-trained also in Praying Mantis Kung Fu, Northern Praying Mantis Kung Fu. And this dude was old, so he was training before the Cultural Revolution. And Chinese martial arts pre-Cultural Revolution and post-Cultural Revolution, different thing. Basically, the government stepped in and said, yeah, all of the relics of the past of this imperial era, we're getting rid of them. But Chairman Mao was actually he was a big fan of martial arts. And so he wanted to preserve a remnant of that, if you will, but a government-approved, standardized remnant of that. So we've got the Chinese Wushu Federation and a very specific set of Wushu forms, which are based on a certain number of traditional forms from a bunch of different styles, but they're also importantly different than the traditional styles. So anyway, I can't say exactly how, because I had limited experience with Praying Mantis Kung Fu, but what this guy called Praying Mantis Kung Fu is very different than what the average Kung Fu instructor at your local strip mall is going to call Praying Mantis. His version was, I know how to fight, I can kick your butt, I can kick and punch and grapple. And their version is, let's have a neat cultural Chinese-y experience. So
yeah,
it's a different thing, man.
And that's the weird thing, because like at least nowadays, most of like the Chinese, Japanese, Korean, most of the East Asian martial arts are not very functional. Some of them are, but they're the exception. And like the ones that are functional, no one's flipping heard of them in the US. Like nobody does them. Like Sanda, you can't find a Sanda school in the US.
And people who have heard of it use an old antiquated name, Sun Shou, instead of Sanda. So if you try looking up that, you'll find very few. You won't find, for example, the Sanda World Championship or the Chinese National Sanda Championship if you look up the terms that people in the US are familiar with, for example.
Yeah. So like in the US, we only know like the bad East Asian martial arts, for lack of a better term. But then we make them worse because so many of the people that take these martial arts only take them because they're obsessed with East Asian culture. And so like the US schools just dive into that, like the East Asian-ness of it all instead of the actual martial arts of it all.
Yeah, I just had an epiphany. I just realized why so many of my subscribers are fans of Japanese cartoons and why they get so mad when I call them Japanese cartoons instead of anime, it's because they love Asian culture, so they practice Asian martial arts, and they watch Japanese cartoons. So
Yeah,
I'm sure I
dude,
just offended 500 people right there.
the amount of people in my gym that watch anime, it's insane.
And they're probably stream
Absolutely
typing
insane.
at the screen. You are wearing a shirt with an anime character on it. No, she's a video game character, which was ex post facto made into an anime character. It's a different thing. Anyway.
Yeah, because you're not wearing a shirt of an anime character. You're wearing a shirt of an Asian character.
There you go.
That was put into a Western video game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
for
that's
sure.
very different.
I would like to talk to you about you made a really interesting video on Dave Grossman's book on killing. And so I read that book and I didn't know much about Dave Grossman as a person. I was really interested in that book. I thought there were a lot of very interesting points in that book about the psychology of killing and so on. And you just picked that apart. And not just that, but the man himself and essentially the cult of personality built up around him, which I had no idea about. That's quite interesting. So there was a one thing that Dave Grossman talks about on that book. He talks about things that make it easier to kill or to inflict violence upon others. And another thing, I'm trying to spit out like 5 different points at the same time. In that video, you said like this is the type of content you really want to make on your channel, as opposed to, just talking about like self-defense things or whatever. And I thought, cool, because this is the type of content I really want to see. This is the type of content I'd like to have discussions about. So in his book, Dave Grossman says that mechanical and physical difference or distance makes it easier to kill. In other words, it's easier to shoot someone from a distance than to beat somebody with your fists or stab them with a knife. It's easier to drop a bomb from the sky than to shoot people in the back of the head one by one, unless you're an absolute psychopath. And that makes sense. And he also says it's easier to kill in a group because then you can essentially delegate the guilt and the shame. Like it's not my fault. It's it's a group effort. And I think those are all salient points. But at the same time, what was it? The points you brought up in that video were so fascinating. Can you give us just a quick recap on your main thesis you made there?
Yeah, so my main thesis was basically that Dave Grossman's main thesis is at least unsupported and probably wrong. And so Dave Grossman's main thesis is that human beings resist killing, and getting human beings to hurt each other is extremely, extremely difficult, and you have to condition them to do so. Okay. And what I did is basically just say the points he uses and the facts he brings up to support his point are either just lies, literal lies, or completely misrepresented, taken out of context. And that if you're going to try and support this point, you need way better evidence than what he's got. And that there's so much counter evidence to that idea that almost everybody resists killing. And then I brought up a bunch of other points, just like how his use of language and the terms he teaches people is just going to clearly lead to bad things. Because Dave Grossman has seemingly devoted his entire career to teaching people to kill more effectively, and really did not think that might have consequences at some point. Also, I'm very pleasantly surprised that you asked me about this video, because I think you're one of the martial arts guys, and I pretty much never expected any of the martial arts community to ask me about the Dave Grossman video.
Yeah, I've got a friend back in the US. He runs an MMA gym, and this book is required reading for all of his students. Now, I think it was definitely worth my time reading. I read this book before I had children. After having children, after watching your video, I started thinking, Again, that main premise that it's very difficult to get people to be violent. And then I watch my daughters fight with each other. And I'm like, hold on. But then they come home from school and they tell me, oh, there's this mean kid at school who punches me in the arm every day. And I tell my daughter, well, you know how to punch him back. And she said, but I can't do that. Well, why not? You punch your sister all the time. But I'll get in trouble. So context is incredibly
Yes.
important when it comes to
Yes.
violence. As far as my daughter is concerned, if she feels like she can get away with it, she'll do it. If she feels like there is, it's her sister, she'll punch in the arm, no question, no problem. But if it's somebody at school, if the teacher is watching, this makes all the difference. And again, this obviously Dave Grossman's book is not about child psychology, but at the same time, it made me think that this is a much more nuanced discussion than what we get in that book.
Yeah, and that's the crazy thing, because you might like read the book and then watch my video and come away like, well, then what is the nature of man? Or is man inherently violent? Is man inherently peaceful? And you hit the nail on the head with like it's context. There are like you can give me basically anyone on earth, and I could conceive of a context in which they will risk their life to save a complete stranger. And I can also conceive of a context where they will kill and eat a baby. Like what you are as good or as bad as your surroundings allow you to be and the people around you are. Like how much you can change in context is like frightening, actually.
Yeah.
Like you can take a very good moral person that's never done anything bad and put them in the right context for long enough and create a monster. And you can do it the other way too.
Yeah, that's basically oh man, you're a Batman fan, right?
Yeah.
You read the comics, so you're familiar with the story. The Joker line is the Joker basically tries to make good people bad. For example, he torments Commissioner Gordon, for example, trying to make him snap. He torments Batman,
The
trying to
killing
make him
joke.
kill.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there are a number of great Batman stories based around this idea there. And it is an interesting idea because most of us, I think, we tend to think, well, I'm a good person. I would never do what those evil people did. I would never be like, say, the Nazis. I would never do what they did. And then we have to understand they're human beings exactly like us. They have the same DNA as us. They have the same basic human psychology as us. They were born in a very different time under very different circumstances with very different social pressures than us. And so I think it's very important for us to realize if we were in a completely different life context, we would make radically different decisions. And so it's so important to be empathetic in that regard with other people from other cultures, other time periods, etc. Because man, at the end of the day, it's complicated.
Yeah. And like the Nazis were terrible, but also like anyone that says that like I would never do a bad thing, like 90% chance they would have gone along with the Nazis at least.
Oh yeah.
And that's like for anyone. Like, were there people at the time that stood up to the Nazis at great personal risk? Absolutely. Were they extreme minority in the population? Yeah, they flipping were, because like even if you have the moral conviction of like, oh, my government's flipping evil, you gonna do anything about it? Are you gonna put you and your family at personal risk, or are you just kind of like just not watch the Jews die? It's probably gonna be that second one, unfortunately, for most people.
Unfortunately, yeah. You have to ask, like, how many of us follow trends? How many of us watch what's popular on YouTube, for example, or what's recommended to us by the algorithm? Because, it's mainstream. And while that's not instinctively harmful, that's not like being a horrible war criminal or something like that. It's still evident of the herd instinct that we have as humans to follow the crowd, to do what other people
Yeah.
do, and to follow traditions, if you will. So,
What also genuinely standing up for those kind of beliefs, like always fight evil everywhere, dude. Show me like anyone in any country on earth, like where your country has never done something like evil, like where your government has never done an evil thing and that government's still in power? Are you in the streets? Are you fighting the government? No, you're not, because that would be insane.
Oh yeah. Man,
like I'm in the U.S. Like we have the CIA here, dude. I'm not going to storm the Capitol. All right, I got better things to do with my day.
Yeah, man, I was almost one of those guys who worked for the government, and then this was the first thing I did outside of college. I applied with the FBI. A good friend of mine applied with the CIA. He now works as a spy, so I probably shouldn't mention his name. So I was going through all the tests to be a federal agent, right, to be a special agent field operative, and the further I got into it, the more I realized this isn't just a job with good job stability and a decent paycheck. And this involves killing people for the government. And the deeper I got into it, I realized I'm not okay with that. I think I'm going to go beat people up for a living instead. So
I'm not going to kill people for the government. I'm going to punch people for myself.
There you go. Yeah. But it was very revelatory. I thought at first, I can do this, no problem. I can do this. And then when it became more of a present reality, I realized I can't do this. This is something I can't do. But I spent a few years in South America, in Argentina, and it was then I realized people outside of the US, especially in Latin America, are terrified of the CIA. So I was a missionary for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. You know, one of those guys who wears the suit with the white shirt, the tie, the name tag, knocks on your door and offers you the Book of Mormon and so on. Anyway, so I'm going out there trying to tell people about Jesus. They peek out the window. They're like, "Are you with the CIA? Get out of here." And they're genuinely afraid because we look like government agents, you know, wearing the dark suits and the ties and so on.
You're a white American in a suit. That's scary.
Yep. And I had no idea that type of cultural idea existed in Latin America until I went there and saw it in person. And it's a very real thing. A lot of people are genuinely afraid of the CIA. So, and again, in America, we never consider that. I never thought about that. I just thought, you know, the government works for us. We're the good guys, right?
Yeah.
America, we're number one. And everybody sees it differently. Everybody sees it differently.
And that's the thing. Like, the CIA is like a terrifying attack dog, but it's our dog. Yeah. We're not scared of our dog.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah. Like no one's scared of their own dog, even if their dog is a bloodthirsty monster.
I used to have one of those, man. It was this black lab. It was the friendliest thing to me and my immediate family. It hated everybody else with a passion and tried to murder people.
But also like backtracking just a smidge where you were talking about like you did not want to kill people for the government because that feels weird. And that is why people like Dave Grossman have gotten so popular, because if you're the government, your job is to think, how do I get people to kill for me more easily? And that's where if you can pump this kind of rhetoric, if you can get someone furthering this narrative, or if you get someone that writes a book on this narrative and it starts doing well, that is attempting to convince people to kill for their government and their society more easily and more effectively, you're like, here's some money, go nuts.
Oh yeah. Yeah, so another thing you brought up in that video was sheepdog response, which I think is thought of very fondly in the self-defense community. And I haven't looked very deeply into sheepdog response. It's something that Tim Kennedy, for example, promotes, and he's very popular on the internet. He's, you know, former UFC fighter, Army Ranger Special Forces guy, whatever he is. Most people give him a pass with whatever he says. And I like the guy. He seems to have his heart in the right place. But what is the criticism of sheepdog response specifically?
So sheepdog response specifically, I only mentioned that in the video as kind of like an example of Dave Grossman's influence, because sheepdog response does like train security and law enforcement. And the fact that they are named Sheepdog Response means they are named after one of Grossman's big theories that he put out
Hmm.
there.
That's
So
right.
I have not looked into Sheepdog Response super deep as well. I was mainly using them to show like even like Tim Kennedy and other companies are just shamelessly base themselves off Dave Grossman. I do know a little bit about Tim Kennedy just because the martial arts sphere as well. Um, and I have no idea how he is as a person. He seems fine, but I would bet money that he is 100% like invested and like drank the Kool-Aid in the Dave Grossman stuff.
That's entirely
Virtually,
possible.
almost definitely. Yeah, because I mean, one, he based his company off of that. Like he named his company after one of Dave Grossman's theories. He's almost certainly read On Killing because he was special forces, and as you go up in the ranks in the military, like that kind of gets pushed on you to be promoted. Um, so yeah, and also if I remember correctly on the Joe Rogan Experience, he said waterboarding wasn't torture. I'm
Hmm.
pretty sure that was Tim Kennedy.
Huh.
Yeah,
Interesting.
he said waterboarding doesn't count as torture.
One of the most famous methods of modern torture, not torture. Okay, okay.
Right, right. I'm
We
like, all right, I'll do it to your family, and then we'll see your opinion. And he's like, no, because I did it. It wasn't that bad. And we're like, yeah, you're a special forces operative who's used to this. You know, let me do it to your children, and we'll see if they think it's torture. We'll see if you think it's torture then.
yeah. So um so speaking of like this herd mentality, and this is something Dave
Yeah,
Grossman talks about, and I think it is observable in a number of cultures. Basically, the more people involved in the killing and the violence, the easier it is. Um, so we see this with like ancient cultures stoning people to death. They'd all pick up a rock and take turns throwing, so nobody was individually responsible for it. Recently, I don't know if you heard of the tragedy of Jonathan Lewis, this high school kid who was beaten to death by a gang of 15 bullies. They were stuffing his friend in a trash can and stealing his stuff. And he ran in there and started punching the guys trying to save his friend, and they curb stomped him. Um, and unfortunately, he passed away from his injuries. Did you hear about this event?
I don't think so. I think I heard like a vague mention of it a day or two ago, but I did not
Yeah,
click on the link. So this is the most information I've received about it.
yeah. I've seen it being passed across social media, and a lot of people are very angry about it. And there was a passerby outside of the school. He was on the other side of the fence. He saw the bullies attack and then run away, and he intervened and called the police and so on. But then the comments were very interesting and telling about human nature. Like, how dare that guy just stand there and watch? If I was there, I would have done X, Y, Z. And again, it's always if I was the one in there, I would have done this. If I was the one in the
Yeah.
cage fight, I wouldn't just hug him, I'd punch him in the face. So
And like to be fair, maybe they would have, but
maybe,
statistically they wouldn't.
yeah. And
Yeah,
it's entirely possible that if that guy had jumped over the fence and heroically intervened, they may have beaten him to death too. We don't know.
probably.
So one thing I'm curious about is if story the effect that stories like this have on the public. And I don't know what that is, but I've had some conversations with other people. My wife, for example, the other day heard the story and she said, "Well, now people have heard this story, they will be less likely to help people who are being attacked." And I thought, I wonder if that's true. I wonder if that's true. So if you compare, for example, violence like mass killings that happen in the U.S. versus mass killings that happen in China, and it happens in both countries.
Yeah.
We hear all these stories about school shootings in America where a number of people get shot to death. Guns are illegal in China, but we still have mass killings at schools. It's happened. It's happened here in Shanghai. A crazy dude got a knife and went in there and killed about a dozen school children. This is a thing that happened, and eventually the police managed to tackle him, take him down, and arrest him and execute him. Now, the big difference, I think, was the level of publicity that these stories got. In America, it's all over the news. People won't shut up about it. It's all over social media. Everybody has their opinion. Everybody knows how to fix it, etc. Meanwhile, in China, of course, the government controls the media, and so they control the narrative, and the official narrative is, we got him, we killed him, justice has been served, the end. And then that's it. It doesn't circulate. And if you look at the total number of incidences, the US, with a significantly smaller population, we have many, many repeat acts of similar violence. In China, not so much. And of course, there are a lot of variables. It's it's a very different culture, different values, different standards, different upbringing, etc. But I wonder, I would be curious to know your take on this. How much does reporting the news, talking about it over and over again, affect public behavior?
I'm not an expert on this, but I have listened to experts talk, and the general agreement is a lot, like a lot. And because apparently, like, you can actually see in the research, not only with like the fact that mass killings are happening, but the specific MOs of mass killings, they'll go through waves of popularity of copycats trying to get the same level of publicity. So yeah, I don't think there's any doubt in any researcher's mind that the level that the US publicizes these stories encourages more of these things to happen. Because if you're some depressed loser whose life absolutely does not matter and no one knows you exist, there's seemingly in your mind one thing you can do to make sure people know you exist, and that's go on a mass shooting. And we do it over and over again. And journalists are starting to make some improvements, such as a lot of them are not reporting the shooter's name. They're not giving any detail about that person so that the shooter themselves cannot become famous through it. Although only some news agencies are doing that, so it doesn't really help if a lot of the major ones are still reporting the name and whatnot. But the tragedy is still gone over so much that there is still kind of a level of notoriety. Even if people don't know your name or face, they still know what you did, and that's not helping. But then what's the alternative? Forbid people from talking about it? That seems worse, especially to an American mindset. Freedom of speech, man.
Because if you start there, if you limit certain things, where does it stop? Essentially, that's
right.
Yeah, and that's understandable.
And that is two different cultures, and like US and China prioritizes certain things. The US is very big on freedom of the press, freedom of speech. So we're like, the legislators are going to let the press talk about it, and the press wants views, so they're going to talk about it. And China is much more focused on social harmony. The US does not give a crap about
use
social
that word
harmony.
so much. Harmony, harmonious society.
Yes, I've every time like Chinese leaders talk about their own culture, harmony, 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 harmony. But the US does not give a crap about social harmony if it infringes on this much freedom. But Chinese society very much cares about social harmony, and if they have to like make you shut up about certain topics because you're ruining the harmony, they'll do so. And this is just like things that different cultures value more than other cultures. It's kind of a matter of perspective.
Yeah. So let's change gears a little bit.
Okay.
You made one of the coolest videos about technique. And I don't think most people think of you as like the go-to technique guy to learn martial arts on YouTube. Judging from the comments I've read on your channel, like, who is this guy with the your video on takedowns up against the cage.
Wall wrestling, yeah.
Wall wrestling. And you correctly pointed out this is something most people don't talk about on YouTube. A lot of people will make a technique video and say, nobody talks about this, and then rehearse something that everybody talks about, like literally everybody.
Yeah.
Now, good MMA coaches will understand that like 80% of takedowns happen up against the cage, and they will spend a considerable amount of time there. But there is a dearth of good YouTube content about that topic. And again, if you go to the average gym, and even a gym that trains grappling, takedowns, wrestling, etc., where does it happen? Up against the cage? No, on the open mat. And it's a completely different dynamic. So what motivated you to make that specific video?
It's a good question. So, like, I usually try and avoid technique videos, mainly because there are people better at technique than me. Like, I am not a black belt. I'm not a high level striker. Like, there's so many channels doing so many technique videos. Like, I'm not going to bother competing because they're probably better at it than me anyway. The only times I make technique videos or really focus on teaching technique in my videos is if I can't freaking find it anywhere else. If either no one is talking about the technique or no one's giving the details that I know. And wall wrestling is one of those few topics where there are wall wrestling videos on YouTube. There's a good amount of them, and most of them are wrong because
I love that you have the courage to point that out. Because
yeah,
again, people
yeah,
will challenge you on that. They'll be like, "You're not a professional fighter. You're not a black belt, whatever." Right?
yeah. Well, and that's the thing, because like the wall wrestling techniques, this is not something that I invented because I'm smarter than everyone. It's just I watch professional fights and I
Yeah.
select out the people that have a reputation for being absolutely world class at wall wrestling and smashing everyone else at wall wrestling, and I say, what are they doing? What is everyone else teaching? They're not the same. They're completely
Mhm.
different things. So the
Yeah.
vast majority of the videos out there are teaching what I think of as the old style of wall
Mhm.
wrestling, which is you've got an upright posture, you're pushing your forehead into their jaw, and you're using one of your legs to split in between their legs to kind of
Mhm.
keep them there. And you can keep people on the wall that way, and you can kind of beat
Mhm.
them up that way. It's not that that doesn't work, so it's not technically wrong, but if you want to get them on the ground, if you look at the people that are getting takedowns on the wall very reliably at a very high level, they're not doing that. They're simply not doing that at all.
Yeah.
And they're doing much closer and a lot of times beat for beat what I showed in the wall wrestling video, which is their posture is very low. Their head is at the guy's waist. They're
Mhm.
smashing them into the wall, and they're looking to lock up the guy's legs. And it that technique, that strategy is made even more effective because a lot of times the defense that the people put in is built off of the old style of wall
Mhm.
wrestling.
Yeah.
So yeah, and so everyone's taught, like, if someone pushes you up against the cage and they've got an underhook, put in a wizard. If someone is down on your waist pushing against the wall, a wizard does not matter
Mhm.
because a wizard can hold someone in place up here, but if their arm's already way down here, you are not going to hammer curl their body back up. It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So yeah, and just so many the offense is not that people teach on YouTube is not the right way to get people to the ground. And the defense is not the way to stop this new style of wall wrestling. So I wanted to make something that actually gave some updated information because everyone just repeats what their coach said and their coach got their information 15 years ago and we just don't do it that way anymore.
Yeah. Man, this reminds me of an argument I had with a gentleman who's he's a jiu-jitsu black belt, and something that goes along with having that certain color around your waist is a certain sense of pride of, well, I'm a black belt, so I must know everything about grappling.
Yes.
And so I'm just looking through Instagram, and Conor McGregor posts a training video of him doing some wrestling at the gym, and I look at it, and it's a short exchange, and there's some nice technical things happening. He's breaking posture, which is with his shoulder, which is something I really love to do from an over under clinch to set up some throws and takedowns. There's a bit of a scramble, and it's a nice little grappling exchange. I read the comments, and of course, the comments are, "Connor sucks. I hate this guy. He doesn't know how to wrestle. He's not a real jiu-jitsu black belt." And I click on some of these profiles, see, do any of these guys know anything about grappling? One of them was a jiu-jitsu black belt, and he's like, "Why don't they just sprawl?" And I'm like, did a jiu-jitsu black belt seriously just say, why don't they just sprawl from positions where, one, it's physically impossible to sprawl, and two, if you somehow managed to, you would be giving the other guy your back. He would just circle around and strangle. that was bizarre to me. So
Jiu-Jitsu
anyway,
guys will learn one wrestling term and just pat themselves on the back about it forever.
yeah, it's like, look, I understand. I watched some of the things this guy did. Great De La Riva guard, great open
Mhm.
guard, zero wrestling skill. And this is very common in the jiu-jitsu community. You know, people develop a very good offensive, defensive guard game, great guard retention. You know, they're 10 out of 10 at this oddly specific skill set and don't pay a lick of attention to wrestling, and yet hold themselves up as an authority on the subject because it's grappling. Grappling is grappling, right? No, it's not, man. So your cage wrestling video was awesome, both technically as a technique video, but also as an example of how to conduct a film study. This is something
Right.
I tell my students, my fighters, and my viewers to do film studies on successful um what's the word I'm looking for? Fighters, not just fighters, but successful implementations of techniques that you want to learn. And that
And
video,
successful specialists.
yes.
Like, yeah, like if you want to know how to do a certain thing, look at the guy that's the best in the world at doing it.
Yeah.
That's probably pretty close to the answer.
Yeah. And a counterpoint people will either make vocally or just think to themselves in the face of that is, well, this guy is special. I can't do what Khabib did because only Khabib can do that, for example. He's magical. He's next level. Well, hold on a second. He's a human. This is one of the most important things everybody needs to understand about martial arts. Everybody's a human. That UFC champion, he's winning because he's moving his body in very specific ways, in very specific patterns that create a successful outcome. And you can emulate that. Now, in one of your videos, you mentioned if you move exactly the same way as Francis Ngannou, you might not get the same result because you may not be
Yeah.
a giant, super strong human being. And so obviously there
Yeah, in their
is a
defense,
caveat to
certain
that.
people, yeah, certain people have strengths and weaknesses. Like Conor McGregor has really good knockout power. If you try and snipe like him, it's not that it's not going to work. It's just this probably not going to be as successful as he's doing it. But that doesn't mean that there's a better way to do it that he's not using because he doesn't need it. It just means you're not going to be able to do it very well. Sorry.
Yeah. So this reminds me of a discussion I had yesterday with my friend Chris Price. He's a pro fighter, and we were talking about emulating successful patterns, but more specifically from fighters with disabilities. And an example I gave was Dominic Cruz when he won his first UFC title. Right, he did that with torn up ligaments in both knees and messed up feet to the point where he could barely walk. And so people often point out he's got crazy footwork. Look at that crazy footwork. He's moving all over the place in weird ways. Let's move like him. And then they try to move like Dominic Cruz, not understanding he moved that way specifically because he had movement limitations because of his injuries.
Mhm.
And so it's not necessarily in your best interest to just copy somebody's style beat for beat because you're a fan of that guy, right?
Yeah.
We have to ask questions like why? Why is it working? Or why is it not working? What happens when I try that thing?
Yeah, I usually find it more helpful to try and copy strategies.
Hmm.
Like what general positions, what kind of dynamics and exchanges is this person trying to set up, and how are they exploiting certain openings and whatnot, while like not really caring about the specific techniques very often, because what techniques you use are always going to be built off of your body type and your abilities and your mentality. But the strategy that you employ with all slightly altered techniques can probably be used by almost anyone.
Okay. Awesome. So on a different note,
Mhm.
I want to talk about things that let's talk about YouTube for a moment.
Okay.
Something that makes my viewers very angry and upset is how I talk about the self-defense industry.
Mhm.
Specifically, I'm very, very critical about the self-defense industry.
Good.
I generally describe it as power fantasy and fear
Power
mongering.
fantasy is a really good term for that. I think I've
Power
used that before.
fantasy and fear mongering.
Yeah.
So, again, this is something that makes a lot of people angry because people make their living on it. There's a big sunk cost fallacy. I've spent 15 years taking self-defense classes, and I feel like you're delegitimizing my feelings. What are the things that people get mad at you about on YouTube?
Oh my gosh. Where to start, dude? Like one, the immediate response is, who is this 12-year-old? People get mad at me because of how I look. People
Uh-huh.
get mad at me because of how I talk. Apparently because I get really excited about things. I just like go into a higher register.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
And the
people get
crazy
mad
thing
at me.
is, if you go to a
Yeah.
jiu-jitsu gym and ask who the best guy on the mat is, it's generally a dude who looks like you. Like some dude who, just clean cut, normal looking,
Yeah.
and you're like, that guy?
It's some
Oh
dude
yeah.
that's like an accountant for 8 hours a day, and then he goes to class and just rips your head off for no
Like
reason.
watch out for Greg. He's a killer. Oh, where and you're looking for the tatted up dude with the shaved head, and it's like, yeah, exactly. Some dude who looks like an accountant.
Yeah, jujitsu is weird like that. But people get mad at me for really like people don't get mad at me for things I'm actually doing or saying.
Yeah.
People get mad at me because they feel personally attacked. And the
Hmm.
reason they feel personally attacked is because I criticize something that they have put their self-worth into.
Hmm.
And then they will look for any excuse in the book to criticize me. Like whether that criticism is valid doesn't actually matter. I had one guy accuse me of making a straw man argument, and he like quoted what I said that's a straw man argument. And I looked at that, I'm like, that is a straw man argument, but I never said it, which means you're actually straw manning a straw man argument. This is strawception.
Strawception. I love it. I've
This
seen
is
some of those.
strawception.
I have
Yeah,
seen
people
so
make
many of
up
those.
anything.
Well,
I had one guy just like a day or two ago comment on my Casey and Defense Lab video and saying like, well, why didn't you bring in a Casey fighting method master and spar them, huh? Why are you ducking? I'm like, well, one, they don't spar. I said that in the video. And two, why is it up to me to bring in guys and like challenge them to fights when they haven't fought anyone? If you're gonna sell your own martial art and make money on it, maybe they should be challenging someone that's actually good at MMA and not some random mediocre YouTuber.
very fair point. Well,
Yes.
that is a comment I
So
get a lot. Oh
yeah,
man.
people don't actually get mad at the things I say. Usually, they get mad that I've attacked their identity and their self-worth by criticizing something that they've kind of wrapped their soul up in.
Yeah. It's the
Yeah,
sunk cost fallacy again. The sunk
yeah.
cost fallacy. You
And
sink time and effort into the one thing and you expect to get a reward for life from it.
incredibly, like I didn't expect this, but my dumbest comments, my consistently like you pick an average comment in the comment section and it is like a 2-digit IQ is my Karambits video.
Oh,
My
interesting.
Yes, my video on Karambits, if you just go through the comments, everyone is unbelievably butthurt. I mean, I can't even imagine the cactus they sat on to be that butthurt.
They probably
And
have a
two,
Karambit collection at home.
and two, like they're making many of them are making unfathomably dumb arguments. Like I've showed it in videos before. I got 2 comments saying that a Karambit would beat a longsword.
Wow.
Multiple people thought that, right? Which is, you think about that for 1 second, you're like, impossible, fundamentally impossible. It would never happen.
The longsword guy would have to make a series of mistakes, of
He would
fatal
have to
errors, one after the
stab
other.
himself, basically.
Yeah.
I have dozens, if not hundreds, of comments saying, tell that to Doug Marcaida. A man with less sparring footage on the internet than me because he has 0.
Oh man.
Like, maybe Doug Marcaida would beat me with a knife, Nobody knows because you've never seen any of us knife fight. I'm going to claim that I'm the greatest master of knife fighting in the world because apparently people don't need any proof for that claim.
Yeah.
Now, to be fair to Doug Mortida, he's never claimed that. People have claimed it on his behalf.
Yeah,
But
that sort of thing happens a lot.
Yeah.
Oh man.
So, do you have a video where like that was like this video had the dumbest comments response from the most butthurt community?
Probably. Probably every video involving Master Wong. That's I picked on Master Wong a lot a few years ago because, oh man, he made a series of, at first I was going to ignore him because he's like just over the top. If somebody comes up to you and attacks you in this oddly specific situation, do this oddly specific kung fu combo, hiya, rip his nuts off, you'll be fine. And it's like, yeah, that's untestable. You can't even test that out. But then he started making these videos about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu techniques, the rear naked choke specifically. He made 16 videos on how to do the rear naked choke, an additional 12 on how to defend the rear naked choke, and they're all bad. They're all demonstrably bad. So, yeah, man, I picked on Master Wong for a while about that, and his fans, his fanboys, fangirls, whoever they are, came after me with a vengeance. I got hate mail. Not just angry comments, but hate mail, email. People looked me up. They're doing everything they can to try to dox me, try to make my life miserable.
My absolute favorite is when people take the time to email me a threat. Like, yeah, all right, you cared about this way more than I did, dude.
I know, man. I got threats of physical violence over Master Wong. Master Wong was upset. He made an angry 20-minute rant where he yelled for 20 minutes and throttled his assistant with a bad rear naked choke in response to what I did. But he never threatened me with death, like some of these people who did on his behalf. So, a recent video I made that upset people, I reported some news about some policies regarding transgenders in NAGA, North American Grappling Association, and the ADCC. And I got some really, really mixed comments. Some people said, I thought you were very fair and impartial in the way you reported this issue. And other people were like, I hate your guts. You are a bigot. How dare you? And
I got the same thing. I've had the same thing on my transgender video.
Yeah, and you came up in the comments. Which is why I bring this up. Some people said you should talk to Armchair Violence about this issue, because I didn't offer a solution. I just said, this is what these grappling associations have done. They have said biological males, transgender individuals who identify as female, who were born male, need to compete in the men's division, period. That's it. That's their policy. And you can agree with that or disagree with it, but that's the policy. That's the news I reported. But a lot of people wanted to know, well, what would be a better solution? Now, I don't think I saw your video on that topic, but people brought it up and said, Armchair Violence has a solution. So what is it? At risk of offending everybody one more time.
Okay, so my solution is you basically eliminate the men's division and you make it an open division. There's an open division which anyone can go in. You, me, transgender people, cis women, anyone can enter the open division. Okay. And then you make a women's division, which is very restrictive. You have to meet very specific qualifications to be in the women's division. So if you do this, then like if you tell a transgender woman you cannot compete in the women's division, you have to compete in this other division, you are not you're not disrespecting her gender identity, you're not shoving her in with the men, you're putting her into the open division because she doesn't meet the very specific qualifications for the women's division. And like there could be cis women that might not qualify for the women's division. Like
how so?
Caster Semenya, I believe, is the Olympic runner who's had difficulty qualifying because she is
that the lady with
the
extraordinarily high testosterone?
Yes,
Okay.
extraordinarily high testosterone. And she, I believe, I might be getting this wrong, but I believe she actually has XY chromosomes.
Okay.
So she is technically intersex. So someone like that, like you might get booted to the open division, but we're not labeling you a man.
Okay.
Now what's interesting is I'm finally gonna reveal this now. I put this video out like well over a year ago. Almost everybody. I got actually very few angry comments in my comment section. Almost everybody was good with the solution. They're like,
Okay.
yeah, that makes sense. You know, they're not competing with the cis women, but they're not being labeled as men, kind of deal. Everybody wins.
Yeah.
Only one person figured it out, and I knew this going in, but I didn't want to raise the point. Only one person realized in the comments, that's how it already works. That's always how it's worked in almost every sport. Almost no sport, almost no organization of any sport, especially at the professional level, has a men's division. They have a division, and then they have the women's division.
Mm-hmm.
It's the men's division almost never exists. So I propose something that already exists on
Yeah.
purpose to see if I phrased it differently, would people suddenly agree with me? And the answer is yes. Yes, they would, more or less.
Yeah. You change the semantic connotation, you change everything. Because again, the solution you brought up is virtually identical to what Naga did, except Naga said, you must compete in the men's division. And
See, that was the mistake.
transgender individuals are like, but I don't identify as a man. I feel uncomfortable with that. So,
Yep, just call it the open division. That's it.
very interesting. Diplomacy, man. The power of diplomacy.
Yeah, you need to call it the open division, and you need to pitch it in a really specific way. But the reason people don't like this generally is because people still see it as the men's division. The reason people see it as the men's division is because, well, controversial statement, the vast majority of people are either cis men or cis women. Transgender and intersex people are a pretty small percentage of the population. And cis women are not going to compete in the open division because they know they're going to be competing with men. They're going to compete in the women's division because they can qualify for it. So the vast majority of people in the open division, they're going to be men by default because that's the vast majority of the population that's left. And therefore, people kind of just assume it's a men's division, even though it rarely is.
Yeah. Oh, man. We got a super chat from a friend, Aaron Kelly, longtime subscriber of the channel, who says, Ramsey got a 3-page email from me lamenting comments he made about traditional martial arts once. I remember that. I remember that. And our friend Aaron is still here, still in the comment section. I appreciate that.
I love getting like really long responses to things.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's interesting because sometimes someone's like genuinely engaging with what I'm saying.
It
But
makes
what's
the
even
best toilet
funnier
reading
to me,
material, man.
but what's even funnier to me is like the really angry response videos. Because
Oh,
this has
yeah.
happened. This has happened a few times now. I'll make like a 10 or 15-minute video, and then someone will make an hour-long response video in which they are just ranting at the camera. And do they think I'm gonna watch it? Because I usually don't. There's one guy, he knows who he is. He's made, I believe, 4 response videos to me. Every single one of them has been
wow.
several times the length of the original video.
I just Googled armchair violence response, and there you weren't kidding. You were not
I was
exaggerating.
not kidding, dude.
They exist.
That's what I'm telling you. I have, like, my fans are great, but my haters are so much more passionate.
Wow.
My haters are the only ones that care more about my videos than I do.
Oh wow, that Wing Chun guy responded to you. Stop the madness.
That might be the guy with like the 4 videos.
He's pulling out his imaginary hair in response to you on the thumbnail.
And then there was one lady who she responded to, I believe it was my transgender video, and she made an incredibly long video. I did not watch it because I value my mental sanity, but my girlfriend Kaylin watched it, and like Kaylin showed me some highlights of it. And this woman, like, she legitimately needs mental help, and she is in a cult. Which is just terrible, but also hilarious.
Yeah, speaking of cults, let's talk about cults. Cults are
Okay.
fascinating because there are so many martial arts cults, so many self-defense cults. Um, do you have any experience with martial arts cults or
I
self-defense
I
cults,
don't.
combat sports
Yeah, I
cults?
really don't have any experience in cults. Mainly because not because I could never be tricked into a cult, but because no cult is dumb enough to accept me as a member. I have I have like been to schools where like, the instructor's authority reigns supreme. What they say is how it works. They kick me out. Like I don't have to leave. They push me out the door. I am immune to cults because no cult would accept me.
You know,
It's a great defense mechanism.
that reminds me of an experience I had that made me realize why so many of these fake martial arts cults work. Like you've probably
Mhm.
seen all the videos. McDojo Life puts them up all the time of the fake chi master touching some dude, and he starts doing the fish dance on the floor, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And it's like a case of it's an exaggerated case of the overly cooperative training partner. So I was teaching a jiu-jitsu class once, and I get a new student to come over to model the technique with me, and I I barely start the technique, and he just falls over, and I said, "Hold on, what? Why did you fall over?" And he said, I thought I was supposed to because you, I don't want to make you look bad." And I was like, No, 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 you." And I explained to him, "Look, you've got to, even though I'm just teaching the technique, I'm showing you where to put your hands and feet and all that, you still have to maintain structure in the same way you would in a fight, even though we're not fighting back, because real people don't just flop on the floor and die
Yeah.
with a touch." And he was like, "Oh, oh."
Yeah, not
So
resisting does not mean you pretend to have zero balance and a neurological disease. It means you just like don't stop me.
yeah, now this wasn't a
Yeah,
stupid person. He wasn't a dumb
right.
guy. He I think he just had this mindset of, I want to do the right thing. I want to impress the coach. I don't want to make him look bad in front of everybody else. I want to, all of these social etiquette norms that were running around in his mind as far as he understood martial arts schools to be conducted. And when I explained the order of operations of, you know, we're focused on reality here, right? We're focused on
Mhm.
the physical universe here. It opened up his mind to the possibilities. And I realized if I were a cult leader, if I wanted to start a no touch knockout cult, that's the kind of guy I would look for. Somebody who is very cooperative, who wants to do the right thing, who wants to please the coach, etc. And I would push him a little bit, he'd fall over, and I would say, "Yes. Yes. Again, more of that."
I have the power.
And then the people who
No,
would
I
question that, "You are not a believer. Out, out." So,
I have a really similar story to the overeager uke thing where we were drilling a sweep in
mhm.
jujitsu class and it was supposed to be with no resistance. And I make a move and he falls down and I'm like, can you balance a little bit better on that one? He's like, it's supposed to be with no resistance. I'm like, yeah, but I didn't do the sweep yet. You just fell down.
Mhm.
But also with what you're saying, where like you can make that into a cult, and that's exactly how you do it. Because the guys that are the most compliant, that always listen to you, that always like make you look awesome, you promote them faster. You promote
Hmm.
them faster. You give them more praise, and then the other people in the school see that and go, "Oh, that's what I have to do to be promoted." And now you're starting to build a culture around you. You're starting to build a culture of the room that's going to praise you as a god. I'm planning to put out a video on how to create a specific gym culture.
I'm looking forward to
I've
that
been
one.
thinking about it.
Now that you
Yeah.
mention it, as far as promotions, every time I see one of these, like, fake aikido masters throwing people around by just nodding his head at them, it's always the black belts who are participating in the demo, and you see the white belts and the lower ranks watching. And
Mhm.
now that you mention, I realize, okay, they got the black belts because they cooperated. And the people watching are being instructed in this narrative of, if I want to get promoted, I have to play along.
No, see, Ramsey, you don't understand. It's because the move is too dangerous and lethal to do on anyone else but a black belt.
And it's
No
obviously
white belt would be able to handle the deadliness of this move.
and clearly banned in the UFC.
Oh, of course.
How many times have I heard that?
Oh my gosh, it's exhausting.
It is. So
Yeah, because also like my immediate response to those people now, like in my head, is like, oh, the UFC doesn't allow eye gouges because it's too deadly of a technique. But like my martial art uses eye gouges because it's awesome, and that's why we're not in the UFC. Like, dude, if you take away one move from your martial art and your martial art stops working, you don't have a martial art.
yeah.
You have a move.
Mm-hmm.
That's all you have.
Yep. Absolutely. Man, if you can't fight without eye pokes and scratching
Yeah,
and biting, you can't fight.
exactly.
Who
Like,
said
because
that before?
there's no single move that you can take away from me that would make me not fight, right? Like, if I'm not allowed to jab, yeah, it's going to hinder me, but I can still fight.
Yeah.
Like, I can still do pretty similar to what I was doing before. If you take away my number one submission, I'm still going to get other submissions. Like, it's not impossible.
Yeah, and this is such an important principle for professional fighters to understand, because I'll illustrate with this with a story. Now, I've never broken my hands in a fight, but I've injured my hands pretty badly. So my first MMA fight here in China, I'm fighting a guy he's a good Sanda fighter. He gets a takedown because his takedowns are good. I get a sweep because he doesn't know jujitsu. I get on top. I start beating him with my hands. And I hit him so hard, so many times in the head, in the hard parts of his head, that my hands start getting bruised up to the point where, like, I don't want to punch him anymore. And the referee is like, continue. Apparently he thought he was still intelligently defending myself. And I thought, well, I also have my elbows. Boom. Good thing I trained those too. So the point is, in a fight, you're going to get injured. You are not going to be operating at 100%. You are going to have limitations. You won't be able to do everything you want to do. You won't be able to draw on your entire arsenal. And so you have to be able to fight with those limitations. You have to be able to fight without your favorite techniques. Your favorite techniques might not work on fighter A or fighter B, because fighting is a lot like rock, paper, scissors, weirdly. Have you ever had this experience? Like some dude
Yes, yeah, the style
sparring with
matchups are
him,
crazy.
no problem, and then a guy who seems like he's objectively better than you at fighting has trouble with the guy you can beat?
Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, this is common.
I think about that like all the time because we have like a good amount of diversity of kind of game plans in our jiu-jitsu class, which is nice. But one of our purple belts, and we don't have a lot of high ranked guys, so he's one of the better guys in the room. But he's very much of like the perfect jiu-jitsu mindset of he's just like he pulls guard and he waits and he's just like very low energy and inactive, and suddenly you're in a submission. And he's a sniper. He'll be patient and you'll make a mistake and he'll catch you. And there are guys that, and I am a very like grindy wrestler style.
Okay.
And so there are guys that give me fits just trying to get them down and trying to control them. And he tears them apart because like anyone that's constantly moving and scrambling, I can barely control the guy. But if you're moving that much, you fall into one of the purple belt straps and he gets you. But then when I roll the purple belt, I do really well because when I just grind my way past things, I'm not giving him any openings. And he only gets submissions if you give him an opening.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love the style matchups thing about like there's different game plans you can use on different people, which would like you can do a game plan that will work on no one else except for that one specific person where it crushes them.
I got a few of those, man. I got a few of those. And that is one of the problems with having the same training partner over and over again.
Yep.
Or having a limited variety of training partners, or having a gym that says don't train with other gyms or other schools because they want to keep you for themselves. Yeah, it's important to have as many training partners as you can, but at the same time, you always have a strategy for your favorite training partners.
Yes. And you've always got the people that you like going against and the people that you just freaking hate going against.
because they have a strategy that works against you. Exactly.
Yes.
Jiu-Jitsu, rock,
Yeah,
paper, scissors. It's a real thing.
dude, there's one guy in my grappling room where he gives me freaking I tear my hair out with this guy because he's like 15 years older than me. He's in his low 40s. But he's got like 20 pounds on me, but he's unbelievably strong, just infuriatingly strong. And I have a very grindy wrestling style, so I'll lock up like whatever I want. Like everything is in place for this perfect position, and he'll just pry me open like a can. I'm like, well, what am I doing here? How is this possible? What am I supposed to do?
Use his own strength against him.
Yeah, that works.
Man, the principle of kazushi is heavily misunderstood in judo and jiu-jitsu. Yeah. Some people get it, or they get it in a very specific way. I was training a student yesterday who actually has a judo background, and I was showing him some methods to unbalance opponents that I really like and use, and he was like, why did my judo instructors never teach me this stuff? They just talked about kazushi all the time, unbalance in Japanese.
Yeah.
And it was like, yeah, man. And it's not something that's often brought up in modern combat sports, like unbalance first. But if you look at fighters like, say, my favorite boxer of all time, Jack Dempsey, if you read his book, Championship Fighting, he says quite succinctly, it's not a setup unless your opponent is unbalanced. And there he's talking about boxing, not judo, not jiu-jitsu, but boxing. It's not a setup unless the other guy is unbalanced. Like, he criticized something that is very prevalent on YouTube today and in boxing gyms today, which is people say, here's a setup. You throw the jab, you throw this, you step here, and now he's set up. No, he's not. He's not set up unless he's unbalanced. If he can square up with you when you pivot, he's not set up, for example. So, yeah, there's athletic crossover from one art to another, from boxing to jiu-jitsu and so on. And sometimes you will learn principles from the most unlikely sources.
I remember seeing a YouTube video on one time. I can't remember whose channel it was, but they were talking about like the Aikido guys. They're like, oh, I use their own force against them, and this is what Aikido can do. And he's like, yeah, combat sports has that too. We call it timing. Where like this is the difference between bad martial arts and good martial arts broadly, is the bad martial arts will kind of repeat platitudes that sound cool. And then the good martial arts will be like, here's how you actually do a thing. And a lot of times the functional martial arts don't even understand that like what they're doing does connect to this nonsense platitude. Like it is actually the embodiment of this platitude, but they weren't taught the platitude. They were just taught how to do the thing. And then the non-functional martial arts will just repeat the platitudes like, oh, no one else can do this. Only we have this super cool platitude. Meanwhile, everyone else is doing it. They're just calling it something different.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
This is one of the reasons I love studying traditional martial arts forms, to try to figure out what they're about. Because have you taken any traditional martial arts classes where you do forms?
No, my mom tried to get me to do them when I was a kid, and every time I just walked in and be like, that's fake, and I left.
Well, you've probably seen them. People are, doing all these hand motions, whatever.
Yeah, I've seen them.
And you're like, well, I've never seen anybody punch or kick or strike like that in a fight. What the heck, man? People don't move like that when in a kickboxing match. And that's correct. People do not move like that in a kickboxing match. And I started asking myself some serious questions about forms a while back, because my first martial art was Taekwondo. My second martial art was Shotokan Karate, both martial arts where you do forms, very similar forms. And they will tell you the stupidest things about the forms. It is very rare to find like a good bunkai, a good breakdown of what the forms are actually for from a martial arts instructor. And they'll tell you things like the nukete, the knife, the spear hand strike. Okay. In ancient times, they used to harden up their fingertips so much that they could impale your guts and rip out your intestines. And And you ask them the question like, okay, then why in the form do you lunge forward as you bring this hand down in this fashion at chest level, and then bring this hand across the top? And they're like, oh, well, that's just for style. Like, really? We're preserving a supposedly ancient tradition just for style points? That didn't make sense to me. Or they'll teach you things like, the middle block looks like this. It is to block an oncoming strike that's coming to the midsection. And you ask them, okay, then why do you bring your hands up here first before you bring them down here? And why do you pull this hand down to the waist if it's intended to block a strike? What if they throw more than one punch at you? Oh, well, and then they'll come up with all kinds of excuses. So I started asking myself the question, like, what if it's actually functional? What if a long time ago, somebody who actually knew how to fight made up these forms for a very specific reason? What if every one of these movements, what if this has a purpose? What if this hand down here has a purpose, right? What if this has a purpose? What if this has a purpose, etc.? And I've made a few videos about this, and a lot of people are like, holy crap, that just blew my mind. And other people are like, that is not the way. That's not what my instructor taught me. Fingertip impalement for life, bro. So
see, I've run into it where like I've seen a lot of people give a purpose behind a move, like a reason something's done a certain way.
Yeah.
And they're wrong. Like sometimes the move is correct. Sometimes like the detail they're talking about is a good detail, and they're wrong about why that detail is done.
Sometimes it's just bunkai fan fiction.
Yeah, and sometimes it's nonsense.
Yeah, a lot of times it's nonsense.
I had someone in my jiu-jitsu class. I think we were in a half guard, and we were blocking their free knee, and he was talking about like have your palm up while you're blocking that knee instead of having your palm down because you're stronger with your palm up. And immediately my head like, no, you're freaking not. It's not because you're stronger this way. You don't do a bench press like this. You do a bench press palm down. But when you're on this side and you go palm down, if his knee starts to beat your hand, you get chicken winged.
Okay.
And then you have absolutely no strength because the ground's right here. Versus if you're palm up and he starts to beat your hand, you frame into your own ribcage and it stops. And he cannot get closer than this without shattering your arm, which won't happen.
So what he should have said is, this is a frame, that's not a frame.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Like, even when the detail is good and the detail works, people will not know the actual reason. They'll repeat the reason they were told by someone that didn't know and made it up on the spot. So that's the weird thing. Like, I get what you're saying, where like a lot of moves might have real reasons. But then a lot of people that claim to know the real reason don't. So it's really hard to tell unless you just really break it down and think about it.
Very much so. And we run into this territory of trying to functionalize essentially what is a historical relic with a forgotten origin. And we see guys like our friend Rokus from the Martial Arts Journey channel who spent years trying to functionalize Aikido, trying to make his wrist locks work and so on. And he spent an immense amount of mental energy in these endeavors. And a lot of people will simply ask, well, why don't we just focus on what we know works instead of trying to functionalize the historical relic because of the sunk cost fallacy? Your opinions on that?
That's a good question. I remember, like, because I was watching Martial Arts Journey while he was doing this, while he was going through that part of his journey. And he's like, I saw the video where he's like, I'm going to go on a quest to make Aikido functional. And I'm like, all right, what's going to happen is he's going to try really hard to make Aikido functional. He's going to make some progress, but he's going to realize he's just turning it into a combat sport, and then he's going to stop doing Aikido and he's going to do a combat sport. And I was dead on the money. It's exactly what happened. And that's usually the answer. It's, can you make an art more functional? Yes. But if you make it functional enough, it'll look a whole lot like a combat sport that probably already exists. And in which case, why did you spend 20 years reinventing a poor man's judo? You could have just done judo. You could have spent that same 20 years making judo even better instead of making something else a worse version of judo.
Awesome. Have you heard of Taido? Taido. Now,
I don't think I've heard of
there are two
Taido.
martial arts called Taido. One is like a weird
Okay.
Aikido sort of thing, but that's not what I'm talking about. One is a modern karate style. So
Okay.
Taido, it's got a bunch of fancy looking movements that look a lot like capoeira, but more karate like. It looks like a fusion of karate and capoeira, basically.
Okay.
And so some of my viewers asked me, "Can you do a video about Taido?" I watched a bunch of every bit of content I could find about it, and I noticed they have tournaments. They have sparring competitions. And I thought, okay, there's no way that their tournaments look like these fancy cool moves they're doing in the gym. And then I watched the
Hmm.
tournaments and they're using all the moves that they do in the gym. And I'm like, well, hold on a second. Because they're often using moves that are not actually the best choice at that moment. Why are they doing that? And then
Hmm.
I talked to a Taido expert, and he said, "Well, it's because of the rules. The rules reward you for using the technique specific to the martial art." And I thought, okay,
I
well,
knew that's what you were going to say.
that is one way to make sure that your martial art looks the way you practice in the gym. But how much value is there in that? I mean, it makes for a
Yeah.
cool looking combat sport, but what's the value in it? What do you think?
Because you're right. Because then the question is, like, why do you have the competition? What are you trying to get? Are you trying to make something that works, or are you trying to preserve these exact moves? Because if you're trying to make something that works but with these exact moves, like now you just got like you're of two minds. You've got two contrary goals here,
Hmm.
where now you're having to make like a really specific rule combat sport, which is weird. And
Yeah.
like this is a really important thing about rule sets where people will follow their incentive structures. You can get people to create and like perfect any strategy you can possibly think of. You don't even have to do it. Other people will do it for you. All you need to do is figure out a rule set that incentivizes a certain set of conditions, and people will figure out how to make those conditions.
Oh, absolutely.
But like, why do you want those conditions to happen? That's kind of the question of like, why are you creating this sport?
Hmm. Yeah, I had a student who was a judo black belt, very experienced judoka, and he comes to one of my
Mhm.
jujitsu classes at one point, and I'm explaining the rules, the IBJJF scoring system to him. And I say,
Mhm.
okay, you get 2 points for a takedown or a throw. You get 2 points for a sweep. He said, well, let me stop you right there. Why would anybody fight for a takedown if you also get 2 points for a sweep? And I said, have you seen an IBJJF
Good question.
tournament? He said, no. And I said, what you just asked describes exactly what happens the overwhelming majority of the time in every IBJJF tournament. Nobody fights for a takedown. Everybody pulls guard and tries for a sweep. He was like, well, duh, it makes
Yep.
sense. That's what the rules incentivize. He got it right away. A lot
Yep.
of people don't. So
But no, he's absolutely right.
as far as the Taido conundrum, Taido where we the rules incentivize using the specific techniques that they teach in the dojo. Playing devil's advocate to my own question here, which is a weird thing to say. Doesn't every combat sport kind of do that? So did you see Jesse Ankamp put out a video a while back saying something like, I will prove that jujitsu doesn't work by entering a jujitsu tournament and then disengaging from the
Yes.
grappling exchanges every time until the referee warned him to not do that anymore because it's against the rules. All right.
Mhm.
And then somebody in the comments said, well, that would be like if I said, I'm going to prove that boxing doesn't work by doing a boxing match and then just running away the entire time by
Yes.
not participating, or saying I'm going to join a judo tournament and prove judo doesn't work by, just pushing out of the clinch every time the dude ties up with you. So in a way, in a very specific way, every combat sport through the rules isn't that far removed from Taido because it rewards very specific behavior. Maybe not to the extent that Taido does. Like, if you do the fancy capoeira spinning kick, you get extra points. Although some of them do. Yeah. I mean, that's how it was in Taekwondo, for example. When I was competing in that sport, you would get extra points for an aerial technique. I don't know if they still do that, or a spinning technique would get you more
I don't
points
know.
than a non-spinning technique. I don't know if they still do that either, because the rules have changed. But it would change the way people would compete. Like back then, you would see people doing more jumping, spinning stuff. I don't know if that's the case today. It's a lot of like foot fencing today because of the rules. So yeah, here's a question for you. I asked this question to my good friend Dan Lukart, who is one of my favorite jiu-jitsu coaches, and I'd be curious to hear your answer as well.
Okay.
If you could change one rule about the IBJJF, what would it be and why?
Gosh, there's so many things I want to change about IBJJF.
But you can only pick one.
Hate IBJJF.
You can pick one.
I guess the question is like, what am I prioritizing?
Okay.
Kind of deal. Like what improvement do I want to make? Do I want to make it more interesting to watch? Do I want to make it more fun to compete in? Or do I want to make it like more functional for like MMA, or more functional for self-defense? One of the big things, and part of the problem is I don't know all the rules about IBJJF tournaments, because there's a lot of them, and I know I never want to compete in one. So I never really learned them.
I don't blame you. It's my least favorite grappling format.
Yeah, but one of the big things I care about jiu-jitsu now is everyone in jiu-jitsu is really good at grappling and absolutely terrible at takedowns. And so the question is, like, if you ever have to use your grappling, if you're either in an MMA fight or like somebody attacks you on the street and you actually have to grapple them, how do you start your BJJ if you can't do a takedown? Like, how do you make grappling happen when all you do is pull guard all day? Because as well as that works in BJJ, like, the one thing Jesse and Camp did get right is, if a dude's pulling guard, you can just walk away from him. Like, he can't do anything to you.
Yeah, if you're not the aggressor, you're fine.
I would change something that makes people wrestle, because jiu-jitsu is an incredibly effective art, and very few people that do it are actually intimidating because they can't wrestle. A jiu-jitsu guy that knows how to wrestle is the scariest freaking person.
Yeah.
Like, they'll rip your head off and there's nothing you can do about it. A jiu-jitsu guy that absolutely can't wrestle, all right, well, I just refuse to grapple you. I'm just going to pull the swiper no swiping defense, and now you can't do anything to me.
It is the difference between fishing and hunting. Like, a lot of jiu-jitsu players, they play like a fisherman. They cast their line out there. They wait, they wish, they hope to, they get what they get. A wrestler is a hunter who goes out there and takes what he wants. He dictates position.
My favorite, this is a rule in American folk style wrestling. There's a rule that says you cannot move backwards.
Interesting.
Which in other combat sports, that's an insane rule. Because I think like bare knuckle boxing or something tried to have that rule, and people were like, no, bad, take it out. But that is, I believe, like an established rule in American wrestling, and it works, and people can obey it pretty well. You can get pushed backwards, but you cannot retreat. You have to constantly engage. And part of the reason no one has ever had a problem with that rule is because wrestling actually works better if you constantly push forward. If you retreat, you get double legged pretty quickly, or you get ankle picked, even worse.
Yeah, I personally would love to see a rule that incentivizes wrestling in the IBJJF. There was one.
Yeah.
They made one seemingly minor rule change that had a tremendous result, but only in the white belt division a few years ago, where they banned jumping guards for white belt, or jumping guard for white belts. Because of, a lot of people don't know this, but that's the biggest source of catastrophic injuries in jiu-jitsu, is jumping guard. So many knees have been destroyed from people jumping guard. People wag their fingers at heel hooks, like, oh, heel hooks, that'll ruin your knees. Jumping guard will do it so much more because you can't control the descent. But anyway, they banned jumping guards just for white belts. Why do I keep pluralizing guard? Anyway, and so I watched this tournament, and I'm watching the black belts compete. Boring. They pull guard and stalemate each other. I watch the colored belts compete. They jump guard and, they do their thing. It's not that interesting. It's an IBJJF tournament. I watch the white belts. They don't jump guard. They start wrestling for position. It is the most entertaining aspect of the entire tournament. I'm like, I'm not bored anymore. Okay, this is cool. Let's pay attention. The least skilled grapplers are the most interesting ones to watch all of a sudden. They should implement this rule across the board, man. Not only would they
that could be good.
decrease catastrophic knee injuries significantly, I mean, why wouldn't you get rid of the thing that causes the most injuries? I mean,
yeah. You know what? I think you got it. This is the one specific thing I would change about IBJJF. A guard pull counts as a takedown. That's what I would change. If you end up on the bottom, the other person gets takedown points. Yeah.
Okay. I thought you meant it the other way around. I was like,
no, that would be terrible.
That would suck.
If you pull guard, you cede points.
Okay.
That's what I would change. That'd be a great one.
That would be a massive difference. I can't think off the top of my head how different it would be, but I just know people would be up in arms about that. People would protest it. People would fight that tooth and nail. They would put more energy into fighting that rule than learning how to wrestle, unfortunately.
100%, you're correct.
But
yeah, the wrestling is more entertaining, and that helps a little bit. Also, to be fair, white belts in general are a little bit more entertaining than a lot of the higher level belts because they just do things.
Yeah.
Black belts will sit there for 5 minutes just working on a single grip.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, white belts have already done 3 backflips trying to pass a guard.
Yeah, like I said, black belts tend to stalemate each other a lot.
Yes. I learn more now from white belts than I do from black belts. Just because I know what the black belt's gonna say. I've seen the moves. The black belts all have the same flipping answers. But white belts, they just try things. You don't know what they're gonna do.
You know who else says something similar? My friend Dan Lucart, one of my favorite jiu-jitsu coaches. He runs Brea Jiu-Jitsu in Brea, California. Again, shout out to Dan. But he put up a post on social media a while back saying his favorite training partners were the white belts. And there were a number of reasons for that. One, they do crazy stuff, and so you've got to, be on your guard. But at the same time, they're low level enough where you can work stuff that you otherwise would not be able to. With a black belt, you're in this crazy chess match of grip fighting. Like, if I let go of this grip, he is going to get that grip, and with that grip, he has a higher chance of passing my guard, and so I must hold on to this one and then fight for that one. And it's, as a spectator sport, it's dumb. But
yeah,
if you're doing it, okay, fine. But a white belt, you're like, I want to test a theory here. I want to see if this idea I have in my mind will work when push comes to shove. And white belts will push you and they will shove you. But they're not good enough to stop the thing, if you will. So they are some of the most valuable training partners, nay, the most valuable training partners you will ever have.
Yeah. Because there's this thing. This is one of the platitudes, iron sharpens iron. All right, first of all, I'm going to use a stone to sharpen iron. But second of all, more in reality, that's not how you get good. You don't get good by going with people that are really good. You get good by going with people that are not as good as you. Because, a few weeks ago, there was a really good black belt that stopped by the gym who was kicking everyone's butt. And my coach, who's Ed from the channel Metro Line of Martial Arts, he's like, did you roll with him today? I'm like, no, I didn't get around to rolling with him. He's like, oh, that's a shame because you can improve rolling with someone that good. I'm like, no, I can't. I have no idea how to improve rolling with someone that good. Because when I roll with a good black belt, nothing I do works, right?
Yeah.
What's my takeaway from that? Leave and go home and never train again? I can't learn from that. I learn by going with people not quite as good as me. Because if someone's just like a step below me, most of my things will work. but one or two things won't work. That one or two things, that's what I work on now. That's my direction.
Yeah, it can be absolutely demoralizing grappling with somebody who can shut down everything you do to the point where you second guess your technique. So, for example, I was teaching a jiu-jitsu class 2 days ago, and I'm teaching a hip bump sweep, a very basic technique that everybody learns as a white belt, and it's a technique that works at the highest level when you do it correctly, when you set it up correctly. And I want my students to understand this is a valuable technique. I've used this technique in professional fights. This is a technique that works across the board when you do it correctly and set it up correctly. But I know how to shut it down, especially against a white belt. And so when I roll with them, if they are doing the things that I ask them to do, I'm not going to smash them. I'm going to let them work a little bit. If they're doing it wrong, yeah, I'll let them know you're doing it wrong. I'll smash them a little bit. But again, if they are working toward the goal, doing it the right way, again, I'll let them work a little bit to help build their confidence. And they understand that. They understand, like, yeah, I know you're not giving me 100% effort right here. I'm like, yeah, I know. I'm letting you work a little bit.
Yeah.
Because that guy won't let you. Like this big giant dude over there, you know, he's not going to give you that experience. You need to have this experience to understand this technique works. You need to get the reps in before. Essentially, you need to make it work before it works. It's hard to put this into words, but yeah.
Dude, that's a big thing where because I'm one of the few guys that wrestle at my gym. So some people that are trying to learn wrestling and they're trying to like get a halfway decent double leg will like ask me for it. I'm like, honestly, like the double leg only works when you truly believe it will work. And the only way you truly believe that it'll work is when it starts working. So it's just gotta happen. I don't know, man. Like so many things are a matter of like confidence and belief and you having done it before. And the only answer is just to like, either you have to, the best way to do it is to graduate up, have people slowly give you more and more resistance like you're doing. You're letting them get the technique, but you're letting them just barely get the technique. And if no one will do that for you because you have no friends, then the only answer is to fail 1,000 times until you get lucky enough to get enough actual reps in to make it start working.
Yeah, fighting it's an act of faith, man. It's very much an act of faith. And when I say that, faith to me isn't blind belief. It's action based on your belief. I believe this, so I will do this thing, right? So that's a great way to characterize a double leg. Now we can outline, you must move in this very specific fashion, but at the same time, there are certain techniques like shooting for takedowns, believing that it's going to work, that believing the guy's not going to stuff it or sprawl on you, and if he does, you can sit out and cut the corner and you've got your plan B and so on. You have faith in that plan. Head movement is another one of those things. It takes a great deal of faith, right?
Yeah.
Faith that if I move my head out of the way, I'm not going to get punched in the face, instead of just, holding still with your hands over your face, where you'll take less damage than you would with your face uncovered, but ultimately more damage than you would if you just moved. And it's a very difficult thing to teach people, to take that leap of faith to essentially move out of the way. It's weird, but it's one of the most difficult things to teach people, even though mechanically it's very simple.
And there's a lot of things like that. And the problem is like people trying to learn it are always asking for the technical mechanical details of why is this not working? And I'm like, you're just not like, you're not committing to it. If you're doing this move so tentatively, like you're just scared. And that's like a lot of times it's not even a matter of technique. Cause there's some people that come into gyms where they are just the most unathletic, most unaggressive people you've ever seen on God's green earth. And you'll teach them how to throw a punch and they'll ask questions and you'll teach them every detail because they want to know of how to throw a punch. And they'll throw a punch and you're like, you did everything correctly. And that was the worst punch I've ever seen. Somehow, both of those things are happening.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like they're technically doing everything correct, but having like having enough experience, having seen real punches, you know that punch would knock out a hummingbird.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it can't do anything. But there's no more details to correct them on. It's just a matter of, okay, now you actually have to gain confidence and want to hurt someone.
Yeah, because
Mike
there's
Mike
more
Tyson
to
had a really
any
good
sport
take.
than just technique.
Yeah, Mike Tyson had a really good take where the difference between like a good and bad, like a punch that hurts someone and one that doesn't, is intention. Is you have to want to hurt someone. And I used to teach MMA club in college. So it was free, and there was a lot of like college kids trying it out, and most of our class was women. And there were a lot of people in there that were there for self-defense and whatnot. And they were unwilling to hurt anyone. And I'm like, if you're not willing to throw a punch with the intention of actually hurting someone, then what's the punch for? You've got to break past this. This is the one aspect on which I will tentatively agree with Dave Grossman on something. Like, you do have to have some intentionality to hurt people, or anything else you're going to do is going to just not work.
Yeah, a punch that does not, how can I put this? A punch that figuratively just tickles the guy is going to solicit a very, very negative response from him that you're not going to like. They have to do damage, they have to demoralize, or they have to put him out. So, Jake, what do you say we open up the chat to some questions from the audience? I'm sure the folks at home have some questions for Armchair Violence and maybe myself. So, it's Q&A time. So if you have questions, leave them in the chat, or we will keep talking about punches. So
actually, and scrolling up a little bit, I'm just seeing a comment. I'm just reading them. Wolfman says, I still find rapier to be the hardest weapon of all the weapons to use well. Dude, just stab someone. I don't know. That seems pretty simple to me. I would say any weapon that's any sort of simple melee weapon with no moving parts that's hard to use, it's just a bad weapon. Like,
that's interesting. He mentions the rapier. Now, if you have a rapier and the other guy has no weapon, you're gold. If you have the rapier and the other guy has, say, an English longsword, probably not. Have you ever read George Silver's treatise on the rapier?
No, I don't read books, actually.
Okay.
I am familiar with some HEMA, but if you mention a book, I probably haven't read it.
Okay, so George, it's not very long. You can look it up. George Silver rapier. Just Google that. You'll find it. It's a couple pages. But he was a swordsman, and you know, he's one of those guys the HEMA nerds will study. Sorry, HEMA nerds, I called you HEMA nerds. I don't use that pejoratively. I'm a nerd. I'm a martial arts nerd. Aren't we all?
I use it pejoratively, and I am probably also a nerd.
But his consensus was the rapier sucks. As if you have a choice of different swords, rapiers suck. He said, look, in a fight with rapiers, in single rapier combat, the better wrestler almost always wins, almost always kills his opponent. If neither man knows how to wrestle, the stronger man will almost always kill his opponent. And when I first read that, I thought, well, hold on a second. They have swords. Why would grappling and strength even come into question? And then I learned a little bit more about sword combat, and the rapier is very long, it's very skinny, and rapier combat tends to end up in a bind. When the swords cross and a prolonged bind turns into a grappling situation almost immediately. And so, as George Silver said, the better wrestler almost always wins. And that made me think, well, hold on a second, that sheds a whole lot of light onto, say, Jiu-Jitsu. Everybody knows Jiu-Jitsu came from the samurai, right? The samurai who were specialized in swords. That was their sidearm, right? And if they didn't have their sidearm, what was their next go-to move? Hand-to-hand combat or Jiu-Jitsu. How's hand-to-hand combat going to work in a battle with long swords? If you have a Daito katana, your opponent has one, you cross blades, you're in a bind, what do? You grapple. So suddenly it made sense. Okay, that's where grappling in Jiu-Jitsu comes from. Sword fighting. Huh.
Yeah.
How interesting.
And I would, because I'm familiar with that quote, and I would add a caveat to it that, like, the better wrestler would usually win. And that's not because wrestling helps in sword fighting. It really doesn't. It's because the person that knows they're better at wrestling we'll make it a wrestling match.
Just
like, if two boxers square up in a street fight, the one that goes grappling will win. Because he's just going to grapple the guy, and the other guy doesn't know how to grapple.
He will be able to dictate position in a way the other guy can't.
Yes. Yeah, what I learned from my brief experience with practicing with swords is that you're never going to stay in a bind for long, but I could force binds, and I could use the bind to close distance into a clinch pretty reliably. So, like, I could force a grappling encounter very often. So the better wrestler wins because he just refuses to actually sword fight.
You know what? I hope that dude from Scola Gladiatoria who made that super long response video to you makes a response to this. That would be sweet. Did you know he made a response to you?
Scola Gladiatoria's response video? Dude, that was one of like the highlights of my entire YouTube career. Because like we've all got like a handful of people who are like, that guy's freaking awesome. And Scola Gladiatoria is just he's one of the HEMA guys where I watch him and he's so much more knowledgeable than the average HEMA guy. It's not even close. Like, you take the top 3 or 4 HEMA guys and he's like completely in a league of his own. And the moment I finally successfully got his attention and he made like a very nice response video to me, very politely disagreeing, I'm like, yes, I can just shut down my channel now. I'm done.
Polite disagreement. Yeah. We've got some questions.
Which is fine.
We have some questions.
I don't think his video was very long, though.
Yeah, it was like maybe 10 minutes. Right. Here's an interesting one. Do you think police officers should be required to learn grappling? A lot of people are pushing this idea right now. What do you think?
I think it's incredibly helpful if they learn grappling. The problem is when you require anything, it's a matter of who's teaching it and how they're teaching it. Because you can teach police officers a bad or wrong way to grapple. And it's also one of those things where like a little bit of knowledge is a dangerous thing. Where if you get every police officer just good enough to be a spastic white belt, did you really make people safer? But yeah, if you make every police officer like a halfway decent grappler, that would be great. If I could wave a magic wand and do that, I absolutely would. I think they should learn grappling, but I think that needs details on it. The implementation of how you do that needs to be careful.
That's a good point. If they mandated like police officers need to go to a jiu-jitsu class once a week, what are they learning in the jiu-jitsu class? Maybe they learn the rear naked choke that week, and then they don't know anything else. What are they going to do when all you have is a hammer? Everything's nail, right? Or maybe they go to a jiu-jitsu class and they learn some De La Hiva thing, and they're like, what am I going to do with this? De La Hiva isn't particularly useful in apprehending a criminal so you can put handcuffs on him. So, we need some caveats to that for sure. So, what other questions do we have from the viewers? Again, if you just tuned in, we are opening up the conversation to questions from the viewers. We have quite a few of them. Let me back up a little bit here. If you see one you'd like to take, Jake, just go right ahead.
I'm seeing one that's questioning whether women should be police.
Oh, okay.
I think the one I'm seeing is responding to someone asking like, women shouldn't be police. But yeah, they can be police, because what people are thinking of, like, well, what about when push comes to shove? You know, when you got to fight for your life and you got hands on a suspect. 99.9% of a police job is not that, or it should not be that, if they're doing their job correctly. The vast majority of police interactions are interpersonal skills and paperwork, which, like, men and women can do paperwork. But you can also make the argument that statistically, women actually have some better interpersonal skills on average. And if we're going to say, like, well, what makes someone better at most of the job, and then we stereotype based off of that, you can make a better argument that only women should be police. I don't think that's a good answer either. But banning women from being police, like, if it comes down to a fist fight, several other things have gone wrong, if that makes sense. Like, and if a police officer is getting into a fist fight like every other week, either they are not in any place that I have ever been in, they do not patrol there, or they are terrible at their job. One of the two things.
Sounds about right, man. Let's see here. Scanning for questions.
Scanning. Just Ian, Kevin Lee.
Do I do too many Q&As and you guys have asked all your questions? That might be. There are only so many questions you can ask, I guess. Okay. Jean Tier says, you mentioned drilling games. I know a few our team made up. Do you have any good ones I may not have heard of?
Honestly, like besides the towel in the back of the shorts, not a lot, because I have seen, like, I have heard of them, I have seen a little bit of them, but I have not been in many schools that have actually done them because they are criminally underutilized. But honestly, like, because the whole point of them is to teach problem solving and to teach coming up with solutions to novel situations. You can just make them up. And sometimes they're going to be dumb. And that's okay, because the whole point is that you just get a ton of options in there. So I honestly do not have a lot of great answers, but if you're just making them up, that's honestly probably fine. Keep doing it.
Okay. Jean-Tier, I'll give you 3 that I do. And I've made a video about at least one of them. They're basically glorified games of tag. So you don't hit, you touch your partner in very specific places while they're trying to do the same to you. Okay? 1, starting from the feet, touch your partner on the back, right between the shoulders, right there. Okay? Just right between the shoulders on the back, not on the side, not on the front, but on the back. This requires you to get an angle. Okay? Much, much easier said than done. So, yeah, it is an oddly specific game, but don't worry, it gets more complex. That's all you do. Touch the back. Next one, touching toes. Somebody remembers, somebody watches my videos. Yes, Flame Zombie, touching toes. Touch your partner on the foot while they're trying to touch you on the foot. Don't let your partner touch the foot. No matter what level you're at, whether you're standing, whether you're on the ground, whether you're sprawling, whatever, don't let them touch the foot, touch theirs. Okay? Next, combine the 2. Touch the back or touch the foot. Then all of a sudden, you're moving all over the place, you're level changing in a very similar way that you would in an MMA fight. Touching the back is analogous to, say, striking, where we're trying to get that perfect angle to get the knockout shot, to get the perfect kick, or to set up the perfect takedown, right? If that's all you do, again, we can gamify that pretty easily. But as soon as you add the touching toes element, now we've got the level changes, now we've got the sprawls, now we've got the grappling element, and it becomes pretty cool. The third game, touch the head, but one person is standing, one person is in their guard, sitting or lying down in guard, right? And the whole objective is just touch them on the head as many times as you can. The person on the ground, don't get touched on the head. The end. That's the whole drill. If you do those 3 drills, I found those to be enormously helpful because they'll teach you a lot of important positional tools. Now, I could teach you all kinds of... I made a video about guard retention, and it was super boring, but super important. A lot of other people, Lachlan Giles, made a whole series of videos on guard retention, which is great information and also super boring. And I love super boring videos, but most people don't. Most people don't, and they don't have the patience to listen to that. But if you play that game, touch the guy on the head, don't let him touch you on the head while you're playing guard and he's standing, you suddenly automatically assimilate all of the guard retention principles while playing that game. Keep your knees off the floor. Keep your knees over your body. Keep your feet at staggered levels, right? Square up, etc., 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 make frames, and so on and so forth. I could throw a bunch of jiu-jitsu jargon at you trying to teach you a bunch of principles of jiu-jitsu, or I could have you play a game that teaches you those principles without any words at all. And when you're teaching jiu-jitsu in a country where they don't speak English, that becomes extremely helpful. All right, we have more questions.
Do you speak Chinese well, though?
My Chinese sucks. I really? Speak some Chinese. I've lived in China for 15 years. My children are fluent. My wife is fluent. My Chinese sucks. I I can't carry on a meaningful conversation. I couldn't do this podcast in Chinese. I
How have
can
you
give
avoided learning Chinese for 15 years?
well, I've how can I put this? It's not that I've avoided learning Chinese. I have a limited command of Chinese.
Yeah.
It is very easy to live in Shanghai without speaking a lick of Chinese. If you speak as much Chinese as I do, you can do very well in this city. So it's not that I don't
Oh,
speak any, it's that my Chinese sucks, and my kids never
okay.
let me forget about it. They're like, "Daddy, why do you pronounce the words like that, like some sort of weird foreigner?" "'Cause I am some kind of weird foreigner. You were born and raised here, child. Settle down."
It's true.
So, yeah.
Um, so the next question right after that I'm seeing, do you think the military should be learning Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu?
Hmm.
I actually have some thoughts on this. I'm probably
Okay.
going to make this its own video eventually.
Okay.
I just haven't done it because this is another like praise of wrestling, and I've just been doing that a lot recently, so I wanted to give it a break. I'd like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is a highly effective martial art. The problem is the advantage that it really has over things like wrestling or judo and whatnot is it's got a lot of submission options.
Mhm.
And the question is, in a military context, when on God's green earth are you going to use these?
Mm.
Because I've seen like Army Combatives is actually based on Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and MMA. It's very Jiu-Jitsu heavy. Matt Larson, who's the father of modern Army Combatives, does Jiu-Jitsu and he's very good at it. And I've seen guys training and it looks like white belts rolling, but in military fatigues and some boots.
Mhm.
Because that's what they are. They are learning jiu-jitsu, but they're doing like arm bars from guard. And my question is, how and when and why would you ever do something like that? Because when you're a soldier on the battlefield, you basically got two reasons to go hands on with someone.
Mhm.
Either you're essentially making an arrest and you're restraining someone, in which case, why are you choking them unconscious? Why are you snapping their arms? You probably outnumber them, or at least you're waiting for backup. You're holding them down. You just have to hold them on the ground, and you really don't need any of these submissions. The second option is something has gone catastrophically wrong. You're in the middle of a life or death fight, and you need to go hands-on with someone because weapons are no longer a good option. And the people that win those kind of fights, usually it's whoever's friends arrive first and then shoot the other guy.
Mhm.
And barring that, it's the person who dominates the fight aggressively because in a matter of seconds, one of you is going to bring a weapon to bear. And you need to make sure that you've got the aggression to do it first. So there's really no really no use case for any of jiu-jitsu's main strengths, which is being able to fight from tricky positions and all of these submission holds and whatnot. But this is a perfect place to apply basic American wrestling because you are holding people down, you are being aggressive, you are dominating position. That is American folk style wrestling. That is what it specializes in. It's fantastic for that.
Hmm.
Plus, the other advantage of if you make it more wrestling heavy is one, you really don't need the submissions. Two, a lot of young athletic American men are learning wrestling in high school.
Yep.
And this would be a great recruitment tool to basically tell them like, oh, hey, you can get like credits or a belt, whatever the flip, in Army Combatives. You should enlist. You can go to wrestling rooms because these people have the exact kind of like aggression that you're looking for. And it also means that you de facto have, because like where in the country do a lot of people go into the military? The Midwest. Where is there a huge wrestling culture? The Midwest.
Mhm.
A lot of your guys already know how to wrestle, which means a lot of your guys can help all the other guys get really good at wrestling really quick. You're going to end up with a core that can basically teach itself wrestling. You don't need any of these submissions, and the basic mentality and tenets of wrestling lend themselves to this job, I think, better than the basic tenets and mentality of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So plus, you've also got the patriotic aspect. American folk style wrestling is an American martial art, the American military. And listen, when you're trying to get like Congress or brass to approve something, that might help, actually.
Yeah, that's interesting. Now that the nationalism factor, you might not, people might not think that matters, and yet look at the IDF, for example, Krav Maga. What is it? Well, I have a friend who was an instructor in the IDF. He taught Krav Maga, and when I mentioned self-defense, he said, Krav Maga isn't self-defense, it's about aggression. What he did, basically taught a 2-week course to soldiers to teach them to be more aggressive, to go toward the danger, to not run away, to not cover up, to, you know, be the perpetrator of violence in a violent situation. Okay. And again, something polar opposite of self-defense. But the point I'm bringing up is they have their own branded thing, right? This is the Israeli thing. This is our own creation, if you will, even though it draws heavily from other stuff, other sources, right? What you said right there, essentially, why not bring an American thing to America? Our friend Harry, the Greek guy, is saying essentially, he's laughing because wrestling comes from Greece, and he's very proud of that fact.
I mean, listen, like what we think of as wrestling, some aspects of wrestling have evolved from Greek culture, but that's only because we look to ancient Greece for so much of like our Western culture. Almost every culture on earth independently invented wrestling.
Yep.
No culture invented wrestling. Everybody invented wrestling.
Harry's going to disagree with you, man. He's going to be like, everything is Greek. Everything.
Everything is Greek. That's the thing. Like we really revere and look to and know a lot about ancient Greek culture, but like no one invented wrestling. No one did. Because everyone did, essentially.
Yeah. And yeah, at the same time, the way the ancient Greeks wrestled in the Olympics, that was submission wrestling, either to submission or to the death. That's a very different thing than American style folk wrestling, where the objective is to pin somebody in a very specific way. So yeah.
We've got a comment. What are your thoughts on only training a few techniques of a style in order to build the on-command muscle memory faster? For example, training 4 to 5 techniques from judo versus the whole curriculum. I would say that whenever you get good at a martial art, like you almost start to use fewer and fewer moves. Like the better I get at grappling, the less moves I use, because I start to hone in on a style and a strategy that is working for me more and more reliably, and I need my plan B and C less. Doesn't mean I shouldn't practice it and make sure I can still do it, but it means I need it less and less. However, that is something that develops when you figure out a style and a strategy that you want and that works for you. It does not come from, here are 4 to 5 moves, just learn those. Yeah. You could potentially do something like that if you learn a system. But that's the thing, to be really good, all of your techniques have to link together in a way where you can flow between them. So like if you're learning jiu-jitsu and you learn omoplata, guillotine, a double leg, an arm bar, and a triangle, how do you connect those things, right? That's not a game. That's not a style. That's just 5 moves. If you just have 4 or 5 moves, you suck. None of them will work. You're just going to suck. If you have 4 or 5 moves that you have like worked at over years to make sure these are the 4 to 5 moves that just link together perfectly, that could work. I've got like, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, I've got about 4 moves that is 80 to 90% of my victories. So that's possible for sure. But I worked long and hard to figure out what exactly those 4 moves should be.
I think it's very interesting he brought up judo as the example. Now, I could teach you My 5 favorite judo throws. I could teach you uchimata, I could teach you haragoshi, I could teach you sumoegaeshi, I could teach you oh, what's another one I like? Ogoshi. Okay, my 5 favorite judo throws right there. And you would suck at judo because I didn't teach you the most important thing. The most important thing is not the number of techniques. It is you have to unbalance the guy. You need a good way to unbalance the guy moving forward, a good way to unbalance the guy moving backward, and a good way to unbalance the guy moving side to side. If you have that, every single technique works. Now, if depending on who you ask, the judo syllabus has between like 34 to 67 techniques, different throws, right? And if you look at the best judokas in the world, they're not doing 67 different throws in their matches. Like look at Ronda Rousey, for example. Her UFC run when she was the it girl, she did basically one throw, haragoshi. She set that up a few different ways, but ultimately her grip was the side headlock. She would set haragoshi up from a side headlock. But she would unbalance her. She had 3 good ways to unbalance her opponent: forward, backward, and side to side, right? Again, if you do that, if you're good at a couple of throws, you're going to be golden. Assuming you're good enough at grip fighting to get the grips that you need to do the throw. So, more so than the number of techniques, the positional tools will trump that. Take boxing, for example. Yes. Boxing has how many punches? 6 basic punches and a few variations of each, right? And you're not going to learn 67 boxing attacks, right? What you need to do is have a good way to get over here, a good way to get over here, a good way to pivot out of the way when the guy moves at you, a good way to get behind the guy, a good way to fake and feint so that you can land your strike and trick the guy into thinking something that isn't real, right? If you can do that, you can win a fight with a jab. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So
you raise a very good point where, like, if you have the distancing and the timing and the balance and, like, you know, the fundamental abilities that go into fighting, then yeah, you could make a lot of things work. If you don't have those, it does not matter what move you use, you will make nothing work.
Yeah.
So yeah, and that's the thing, like, if you have those fundamental things, could you get by with 4 to 5 kind of unconnected techniques? You might be able to get by with that. If you have 4 to 5 very well connected techniques and those fundamentals, you'll do very well. If you don't have those fundamentals, it doesn't matter whether your techniques are connected or not, none of them will work.
Yeah. At the same time, there are certain types of people, and I don't know if our questioner is one of these types of people. If you teach them how to attack, and I think teaching people how to attack first is the most important. So instead of teaching them mount escapes or whatever, teach them attacks first, because then the gears start turning in the mind. How do I get to the position where I do this attack? So if you teach someone, say, an arm bar from full mount, they will start thinking, okay, how do I get to full mount? And they'll start to fight to get to that specific position. Okay? If you teach someone uchimata, the judo throw, right? They will start fighting to get the specific grips to do uchimata from. They might not understand the kazushi, they might not understand how to unbalance the guy side to side, back and forth, etc., but they'll at least fight to get that position, and they'll probably get tossed on their butt a whole bunch of times along the way. Eventually, they might figure it out. But it is what it is.
I got a question. This is for me, asking if I'm going to do a part 2 of the knife fighting series, or if that's on the back burner because of algorithm shenanigans. I am doing another knife defense video. I'm writing it right now. It's planned. My turnaround time is just very, very slow. But I'm doing it on knife defense, how to actually, like, hopefully stop a knife attack based on watching a lot of knife fights. But yeah, I do plan these things. I try and do them, but I will generally, like, conceive of a video in my mind probably 4 to 6 months before you ever see it. So I'm just slow.
Yeah. So Jake, what do you have in the works right now as far as videos? Can you tell us anything about what to expect?
Um, I've got a lot of videos like written right now, but my process is long because I write the video and then my girlfriend like edits the script, and then I go through those corrections and then we film it and then I either edit it or pass it off to an editor. But I've got one on knife defense, which was absolutely exhausting to do, and I started it months ago. I've got one on why like pad holding sucks,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just a dumb thing to do. And then I've got a couple that are starting to branch out into like a little bit of firearm content because I'm trying to keep branching out the violence.
Okay, cool.
And
I'm looking
I'm
forward to
trying to
that pad
figure out,
holding one. I think
yeah,
I'm
I'm
going to
trying to
enjoy that
figure out
one.
what order I want to put these things out in.
Man, pad holding. That there is so much junk training in combat
Yeah,
sports. Junk
yeah,
training that people don't think is junk training. Hitting pads is not necessarily junk training, but I would say most of what happens in gyms while people are holding pads is bad and not productive and not helpful. But people are
yeah.
taught you need to do this. This is a tradition that dates all the way back to 1974. Yeah, pad holding isn't that old, man. It really isn't. But we have this idea. We have to do it because I saw a highlight reel of somebody holding the pads and it looked really cool. And if I can't do that, I can't box. Not true.
Yeah. You do not need to hold pads or like hit pads to learn how to strike. It can be used for certain things, but most people are using it in the wrong context and they're leaning on it way too heavily.
Yeah, I would agree 100% with that.
Yeah. Let's
So,
see. Which of the following style of boxing would be the most effective for street fights? Philly
hmm.
shell, peekaboo slash high guard, or Ali's outboxing style? First of all, I would say that peekaboo and high guard are very different strategies
Hmm.
because peekaboo very much relies on footwork and head movement to work into the pocket, and high guard very much relies on shielding your face from strikes. So like
Yep,
they're similar in that like your hands are 3 inches apart, but they're doing entirely different things.
true.
Um, but beyond that, it totally depends on what you're good at and what you're actually trying to do, I would think. Because if you are 6.5 feet tall with super long arms and you're incredibly agile, Ali's outboxing style might work really well for you, and peekaboo might be a really stupid thing for you to try. But if you are 5'4" and built like a tank, it reverses. So it depends on what your actual goals are and what your actual abilities are. Plus, like if you're trying to knock the guy out and finish the fight very quickly because maybe your cardio sucks, kind of deal. Maybe you've got to finish this and get out of there quickly. Then something like Ali's outboxing style or a high guard, it's going to take too long. Like you do not have the offensive capacity to knock this guy out immediately. Where something like peekaboo, you might be able to get in there and get him out. But and this is all going to depend, like, do you have the physical ability to knock someone out quickly? Were you born with enough knockout power to use this as a reliable strategy? So there's no correct answer, I would say. Ramsey, I don't know what your thoughts are on it.
Yeah, there are just so many variables in that question. My answer would be don't get into street fights.
Fair.
Just a dumb idea. Just don't. Just don't. People hate my
The
response
Waffle
to
House
street
is so
fight
tasty.
questions. I get so many street fight questions, and my answer is always don't get into street fights. Just don't. But what
Yeah,
if you
if you
can't
could help
not
it.
get into street fights? It's like, okay, look, if you've been in like a couple of street fights, okay, I'll give you that. If you get into a street fight every week, that's on you, man. That's your own fault. You're the
100%.
dude starting them, man.
Yeah.
So
And caveat, like, that is based on the societies in which we live. Because I have heard, and I cannot verify this because I don't living live there, but I've heard there are like third world countries where hey, fighting is normal and you cannot walk away from fights because like either they'll hunt you down or like no one will talk to you ever again. And like fighting is just something you have to do in some remote third world countries, and maybe that's true. But if you're watching us on YouTube right now, you probably don't need to get into street fights more often than not.
you know, as someone who's spent a significant percentage of my life living in third world countries, I can tell you handing over your money goes a lot longer than, street fighting. It'll save you a lot more than your boxing skills in the streets because
That was a great moment in the self-defense championship
oh yeah.
where Jeff Chan found out, was like, I could have just handed him the wallet.
Oh man, so the crazy thing about that, let's talk about that moment. I know people love that moment where I hand over the wallet and Jeff was like, I could have done that instead of fighting him and getting stabbed. Um, so as I understood the instructions, and I was super sleep deprived, and I wasn't completely there to be
Yeah.
honest. So during the rules meeting, I literally fell asleep. So as I understood the instructions, it was wait for your opponent to get a position, have your eyes closed, wait for them to get a position, and then once they have the position, fight back. That's what I understood. And I'm
Mhm.
I'm I'm visually impaired. I've got a blind spot in the center of my vision. So if you hold up your hand right there, it's like living like that. So the peripherals are fine. With those helmets on, my peripheral vision's gone. It's like being blindfolded.
Yeah.
So I'm effectively fighting blind the whole time. And so I'm waiting for the guys to get a position on me, and then I fight back, right? And so the first guy he comes out and grabs my back and does a takedown. Then I you know start grappling with him, right? And then the knife guy comes out and he grabs a collar tie. And this helmet is also plugging my ears, so I can't hear very well. And I start to reach up to do a Russian tie up to set up one of my favorite takedowns because I'm
Mhm.
like, oh sweet collar tie, lazy collar. I'm gonna ragdoll this guy. But then I hear this muffled sound through the headgear, and he's like saying like, don't try anything funny, like don't mess with me. And I'm like, he's talking. Why is he talking to me? The other guys didn't talk to me. And and I turn my head a little bit, trying to get like a little bit of sight. I'm like, he's talking to me. Well, hold on. There's a knife because I feel it. I don't see it, but I feel like something
Okay.
pressed up against my throat. And I'm like, oh, this is a simulated mugging thing. This is a self defense school. I guess they do this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, well, I've been in this situation in real life multiple times. I've been held up at gunpoint. I've been robbed with blades and gangs with weapons and all of that. And there's no cool street fight story to go along with it. The story is give them what they ask for slowly. And I'll add some caveats to this because I I had a friend who got shot in the head. So this happened when I was a missionary in Argentina for my church, and something about walking around in a third world slum dressed up in a nice suit and tie makes people think that you have money, and so the missionaries get robbed a lot in Latin
Yeah.
America, like a lot, especially in Argentina, man. Um, so there was one day I'm walking down the street with my missionary companion, and this gang of like 12 dudes starts chasing us. We start running. We're running as fast as we can. They run faster. They surround us. There's a circle of them. One guy takes out a gun. Several of them have knives. Some have sticks. A guy's swinging a chain around. There's this little dude with a brick patting in his hand like this. And they're like, give us everything. And I didn't have any money. And I remember this story of a friend of mine who got shot in the head. And this shaped the way I thought about these violent encounters, because he had a backpack on and he got nervous, understandably so, because there's a dude pointing a gun at his head, and it's not point blank like in all of the self-defense videos where they do the gun disarm. It's these guys aren't idiots. They understand what a ranged
Yeah.
weapon does. They keep their distance. And the guy has my friend has money in his backpack. He starts taking it off. He's nervous. He's twitching. The guy with the gun gets nervous too. He squeezes the trigger, intentionally or unintentionally, shoots my friend in the head. My friend miraculously survived, but he got shot in the head. And so this story's flashing through my mind, and I'm like, okay. I had another friend who got shot because he didn't give them anything, because he didn't have anything. I was like, okay, I have no money. I can't make any sudden moves. I have to give them something. What do I have? I have a bag filled with scriptures and church pamphlets. This is not going to end well. And so I raise my hands very slowly and I say, I narrate every move I make. because I want them to know I'm not going to surprise them. I say, I will give you everything that I have. I am taking off my bag. Look, I am putting it on the ground. I am opening it up. I am pouring the contents on the ground. You can have everything in this bag. I take out the scriptures, start handing them out to people. Here's a Book of Mormon for you. And I come up to the guy with the gun. Here's my Bible. And as I hand him the Bible and I hand out all these pamphlets about Jesus, and they're like, dude, never mind. Just never mind. Get out of here. Get out of here. And they leave. So the takeaway there is, you can't kung fu your way out of a gun. I know there's probably some dude out there in the comments who had some dude who probably didn't have the intention of killing him, who probably did a kung fu disarm, and he's like, actually, I did it once. You got lucky. You got incredibly lucky, if that's the case. But yeah.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, like, these things happen. It's hard to talk people out of, like, this is a bad strategy, because these things can kind of happen in the same way that people do win the lottery. But you probably shouldn't play the lottery because it would be a stupid choice. Yeah.
Yes. Do not gamble with your life, man. Like, going back to the self-defense challenge thing, like Jeff Chan probably did about as well as somebody could if they were to fight back against the knife-wielding attacker. And this knife-wielding guy, he wasn't even the best guy at fighting in the room. And Jeff got stabbed 3 times. He got stabbed in some places that could be fatal 3 times in that exchange. They still gave him the point for some reason, but yeah. What?
Yeah, well, I remember in the self-defense challenge things, they also, like, counted it so weird, because there was at least one challenge where, like, everyone was trying to defend knives, and if you got stabbed, you basically lost. I'm like, that's impossible. That's a impossible challenge. But I have researched it, and the vast majority of knife wounds are survivable.
Yeah, so, okay, like, that is the point. Okay, so I said at the beginning that one guy got really mad. He's like, Ramsey, how dare you do a podcast with that Armchair Violence guy? He said that knife wounds are survivable, but this is actually true. I have looked up the data on this. It is well documented. It's not good to get stabbed. It can be fatal. People have died, of course. But yeah, the majority of people with knife wounds, including multiple knife wounds, have survived.
Sometimes.
Yeah, if you look at police reports of people who die of stabbing, how many times did they get stabbed? It's always some crazy number, like they got stabbed 100 times. And if you don't know how this works, you're probably thinking, what a crazy crime of passion this was. He was so mad, he stabbed him. I hate you so much, I will stab you 100 times. No, it's not that. It's just the fact that if you think about it, stabbing someone doesn't kill them instantly in most cases. Okay, stabbing someone makes them fight back like an enraged animal fighting for their life. Stabbing someone makes someone scream and you know, just be very violent against you. And so what do? They're like, why won't you die? This doesn't work the way it does in the movies. And so they just keep doing it until eventually the guy bleeds out, or they hit the magic spot, whatever that is. But yeah, that's
like, obviously don't get stabbed, because it is a crapshoot. I have seen people, like, just walk it off after being stabbed literally dozens of times, and just they're fully coherent. I mean, they're bleeding, but otherwise they're just gonna walk themselves to the hospital. And then I've seen people get stabbed once and just die. They just keel over and die. But I mean, thankfully, if you are stabbed, the especially like a 2 or 3 times kind of deal, the odds that you're going to survive are really high. You have to be stabbed in really specific places to be in risk of imminent death. Now, you can bleed out eventually, so like go to a hospital. But as long as you try and get prompt medical attention, odds are you're going to survive.
And
don't try your luck. But
that is an important caveat to that statistic is the people who survived got medical attention. They didn't simply
yeah,
walk it off. So
yeah, and I don't know why that guy got so mad at me for saying that because like it's true. I don't know what you want here.
and
Like,
it's interesting because this he's a longtime subscriber of the channel, and he's usually like
mhm.
very positive in the chat, in the comments, and then all of a sudden it's like, not that guy. I was like, wow, this is a very impassioned reply. How how many times did Armchair Violence pee in your Cheerios, man? This is shocking to
I
me.
break into his house every morning.
All right,
Dude,
let's
it's really funny because I feel like the people that hate me are just like slowly going to coalesce. Because I've
mm,
started like occasionally I'll go on a response video to me, and like I was on a response to me the other day, and one of the guys that really hates me that's made 4 response videos to me, he was in the comments on that response video. It's like, I'm so glad you're calling this guy out. I'm like, they're gonna seek each other out. They're gonna form some sort of anti-armchair violence alliance here, and they're all
I've
just
seen
gonna make
this.
hundreds of hours of response videos per minute.
I have seen this sort of thing happen on YouTube. Alliances, coalitions against other YouTubers. Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
thing. It's a
Dude,
thing.
it's crazy to see apparently like this recent split in the HEMA space because
Yeah.
I want to say it was like I can't remember but yeah, Matt Easton uh decried one of the other
Oh, was
HEMA
that the
medieval
Scola
combat guys.
Gladiatoria and Shadiversity?
Yeah, Shadiversity, thank you.
Yeah.
I keep getting Shadiversity and Skolagrim's names confused, and I didn't want to say the wrong one. But yeah, like Scola Gladiatoria called out Shadiversity for because they just have different political takes,
Yeah.
and
It
it's the
wasn't even
funniest
about
flipping
like
thing.
HEMA. It was about like, just
Yes,
socio-political.
it was about politics
Yeah.
because apparently, Scala Gladiatoria is like did not like the right wing takes kind of deal, and people are actually arguing about that in our comment section right now. By the
Oh,
way, people are
interesting.
talking about
Oh, wow.
that,
Wow, that
and
is fascinating.
yeah,
Man,
it's such a funny thing to me because it's just like, who cares? Who cares? Like
I
that's
know,
not
man.
even what your channels are about.
Look, I have no idea what your politics is, what your politics are. I don't care.
Mhm.
I don't if
Yeah,
I only ever associated with people who were exactly like me, I would have 0 friends, 0 conversations, 0 social interactions. I would be the most losery loser of the losers, man. It
yeah,
is a terrible way to live your life. In fact, one of the best ways to live your life, just go out there and speak to people with different opinions, different life experiences, different politics than you. Challenge your paradigm as often as possible. We always say in combat sports, get comfortable being uncomfortable. We should do that in life too.
yeah. It's insane how people can manage to insulate themselves. Like I was in college and I was speaking to a full-grown adult, and that adult had never ever met someone of the opposite political party
Hmm. Wow.
until me. I was the first person from the opposite political party. And remember, this is the US. There's only freaking 2 of them
Yeah.
basically. And I was the
That's
first
wow.
person to ever talk to from the opposite political party, which is mind-boggling to me. Because I'm like, I have people from both political parties in my family. Like,
Yeah.
they're unavoidable. How did you do this?
That is a special kind of bubble to live in America, man. Like, wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, man, I grew up in a small farming town in Idaho. Idaho is notoriously right-wing, gun-toting,
Yeah.
redneck type of state. And I met people from every political party
Right.
there, man, in
That's
my
the thing.
small town with 1,000 people.
You grew up as a Mormon in Idaho and still managed to meet liberal people. Like, it's how do you avoid this?
It, it's bizarre. It's like it would take a special type of effort not to. Hmm.
Yeah, it's really weird, and like there is a weird narrative where people are just demonizing people that disagree with them on politics. And listen, like there are some horribly bad political takes out there. I will
Yeah.
be the first one to admit that. I have plenty of strong political opinions. but also like I have met very few people. Like I have met plenty of people with really just terrible political opinions. Not even evil, just mind-bogglingly stupid, and sometimes mind-bogglingly stupid to the point of evil. But they're never malicious. Like they're never trying to be mean. They're never trying to be malicious. They're always making a good faith effort to find the correct solution, usually just willfully ignorant about the problem because they're either completely uneducated or they're coming at it with a really strong bias or both. But I can almost guarantee that the other side of whatever conflict you're on is not evil.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
For
it's weird
sure.
to see. It's weird to see how angry people get about it.
We have a tendency as human beings to see ourselves as a protagonist in our own story. Like, I'm the good guy. The people on my side are the good guys. The people who think like I do are the good guys, and everyone else, obviously not. It's a dangerous way to think. It's a dangerous way to compartmentalize humans. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
All over the
maybe
place, I think.
let's take maybe one or two more questions, and then I got to skedaddle. So let's. What else? What other comments or questions do you have for our friend Jake here from Armchair Violence? Folks at home,
Ooh.
did we miss
I'm
any
trying to
good
scroll
ones?
up to find something.
Did Ricky Schroeder have a baby brother? Do you know who Ricky Schroeder is? I have no idea who
No
that is.
idea. No. Are they saying I look like someone?
Maybe he's a bald guy and they're saying I look like him because when you're bald,
Ooh.
you look like every bald celebrity.
Maybe, but most people that see you wouldn't think little brother.
Hmm.
But people
Unless
that
he's
see
super
me
old.
assume I'm like 17. So yeah.
Yeah.
Dude, the big ones I get, I sound like Ben Shapiro. I look like the scout from TF2. That's the funniest one to me. I'm gonna
Yeah.
start talking with a Boston accent just because that one's funny to me.
Burger Time says Ramsey
I
in your
saw
prime. Could you win
one.
UFC 1? I am in my prime, man. This is what a peak male physique looks like.
You may not like it, but this is what peak performance looks like.
Exactly.
I love that meme. Do you think you could?
Oh man, that's a you know that's a weird conundrum. It's very easy to look back at that and think, I've got skill sets that are levels above the skill sets anybody brought into UFC 1, but at the same time it's a whole different level of combat stress. A 8-man tournament. I've never done an 8-man tournament involving strikes. I've done a bunch of fights in 5 different combat sports. I've never
Mhm.
done an MMA tournament where you do multiple fights in the same day. That is game changing by itself. So it's easy to think like, oh man, my jiu-jitsu is better than Hoist Gracie's was back in 1993. And there are a lot of people in that boat. I mean, there are tons of dudes who could out grapple Hoist, that version of him back in 1993 today. His takedowns sucked, to be honest, from a wrestling standpoint. I could definitely out wrestle him if it was a contest of wrestling. Now, to do what Hoist did, I I hesitate to answer this question, even though I made a video about it, because it comes off as very dismissive of the accomplishments of the guys in that tournament, especially for that time. It's like saying, if I could go back in time with a minigun and an unlimited supply of ammunition, could I defeat the Spartan warriors of ancient Greece? Um, yeah, it's a weird question to me, man. Oh no, we've lost Jake. Jake, where are you? Come back, man. We've cut out. No, maybe his battery died. Okay, well we'll give it a minute and see if our friend Armchair Violence can rejoin the chat. Oh, he's coming back. See if we can get Jake back in the chat. There he is.
back. Okay. So sorry. Yeah, it is a weird question because yes, it's totally cheating because you have martial arts knowledge that like in development that they just didn't have at the time. But I feel like that's the point of the question because they're like, could you, whoever they're asking, like, a decent but not world class person, if you go back in time, would you be world class? I feel like that's really the question. It's not even so much about like you or me. It's about like the development. They know we're mediocre. They know we're not the best in the world.
Yeah.
I don't think I could do it mainly because of size. I know like Hoist Gracie was not huge. He was like 180 something.
But he wasn't
and the
tiny.
Other guys were bigger than him. Yeah,
he wasn't tiny.
He wasn't tiny. That's the thing. Like I'm 20 pounds smaller than him. And he was already a lot smaller than a lot of the guys there. And part of it is also like, if I placed Hoist in that spot in the bracket, I would have a much better chance, I think, because they structured the bracket in a certain way that gave him a little bit of a better chance.
Absolutely. Hoist's first fight with Art Jimerson, the guy who grappling is completely foreign to him. It's going to be easy, even with bad wrestling, for Hoist to get under his guard and take him down. And he didn't even have to choke him out. Art tapped to panic. He had a boxing match coming up later that month, actually. And so he didn't want to get injured. So he's like, screw this, I'm tapping out. I get paid the same regardless. And then
I think if I did it, I'm small enough that someone's going to catch me with a good enough strike that's just going to be an amount of force that 180 something pound person can push through, and 160 pound person is just going to have some trouble with.
If you think about Hoist's next matchup, what was it? Gerard Gordeau, I think that was his next matchup, and he fought not a fresh Gerard Gordeau. He fought Gerard Gordeau, who was already tired from his previous fight with a giant sumo wrestler and a broken hand that had a tooth embedded in it, and damage to his foot from kicking the dude in the face. So it's a very good question. What would happen if I fought a fresh Gerard Gordeau instead of, say, Taylor Toule? I probably would have taken some damage there. I know enough about mixed martial arts strategies that could be a perfectly winnable fight. But if that was my first matchup in UFC 1 in this fantasy scenario, I probably would have got punched and kicked really, really hard and would have done damage, and that would have carried over into the next fight. Now, if I got a injured and tired Gerard Gordeau, totally different thing, which was the case with Hoist Gracie. So, yeah. It's hard to say. How you structure a tournament changes everything.
The weird thing about fighting like good strikers that don't know grappling is like if I fought Gerard kind of deal in that time, I feel like I would either very definitively win or very definitively lose. Not a whole lot in between.
Yeah, it wouldn't be a split decision.
Yeah, like he would try and light me up. I would try and go for a takedown. One of us would succeed, and that would decide the rest of that fight.
Yeah, and ultimately the rest of the tournament too.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, because it's not just, it's not just, could I beat Hoist Gracie? Maybe. Could I beat Gerard Gordeau? Maybe. Could I beat Ken Shamrock? Maybe. Could I beat each of those guys consecutively one after the other?
Yeah.
Accounting for all of the potential variables that could happen in each of those matches. Man, tournaments are complicated in that way.
Yeah, and that would be a hard ceiling for me, is even if I got past everyone else, Shamrock. Like, Shamrock would be bigger than me, way flipping stronger than me, and also know some grappling. I don't know if I could beat a prime Shamrock. That's not going to go well for me. I'm not a bad grappler, but I am not an amazing grappler by any means.
He was beastly. I imagine you probably had the experience of, a big, strong dude who doesn't know any grappling, who comes to a jiu-jitsu class and kind of mollywomps people. Has that ever happened to you? Yeah, and it makes you upset because you're like, I know so much more technique than you do, and I can't defeat you.
Dude, I rolled with a guy one time. Like, he knew jiu-jitsu. I was better than him, but he wasn't bad. But he was 265 pounds and just yoked, just absolutely jacked. That was ridiculous. And like, I survived. He didn't tap me, but I was also fully aware of like, man, I was better than him, and it did not flipping matter. I threw a double leg on him, and especially at the time, I threw my double legs where I would like headbutt your stomach to push you backwards. And I threw that double leg on him, and it felt like I smashed my head into a wall. Like he just didn't
Ooh,
move anywhere, and I
one of
just felt a
those.
shockwave reverberate down my spine. I'm like, well, this is not going to go well for me.
Yeah, there's some matchups like that where you're like, this just
Yeah,
doesn't seem fair, does it?
that's
All
the
right.
thing. Like, size and strength matter so much in a fight, and jiu-jitsu people don't want to admit that because it means that they'll actually have to go to the gym.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you
Yeah,
got to
you
get
gotta.
strong, man. People often ask me, like, this is funny. I remember when I started taking strength and conditioning seriously, and there were really only
Adjust the chair.
two lifts I took seriously. Three if you count pull-ups, squats and deadlifts. But I started
Mhm.
squatting and deadlifting religiously. And after about a year of that, people started complaining about how strong I was. You know, that backhanded compliment, the most backhanded
Yeah,
compliment in jiu-jitsu. Dude, you're so strong. Dude, did you wrestle in high school? That's another one. I didn't wrestle in high school. I learned wrestling as an adult. But it wasn't until I started squatting and deadlifting religiously and I developed that base, core, foundational, postural strength that every serious grappler should have, that I started getting accused of taking performance enhancing drugs by some people. Like, what are you taking? What are you on, man? Like a year ago, you weren't this tough, man. You weren't this strong. What happened? I'm like, I started lifting weights. Like, no, I lift weights. Do you do squats? No. Do you do deadlifts? No. That's the problem.
yeah,
So yeah, it's
yeah, and that is a lot of it because like your your technique feels so much better when you can put some oomph into it.
oh
Like
yes.
just yeah, being able to have that squeeze and being able to throw people around, it's hugely beneficial. Like most of my training partners are bigger than me. There's two people my size. There's like there's a couple people smaller than me. One's a kid and one's a girl. Um, and then there's like at least a half dozen people bigger than me. And
Mm,
I roll with them the most. And I have to be more athletic than them because if I'm not, then they're gonna crush me. But
yeah.
like being having that level of athleticism and being able to like move someone that outweighs you by 50 pounds, oh, that's an absolute game changer. And then when you finally lock up with a guy your size, you can ragdoll them, and that's a beautiful feeling. Let me tell you, being able to ragdoll someone.
Yeah. When I was new at jiu-jitsu, like a lot of people, I was looking for the magic pill, for the magic secret, so the little guy
Mhm.
could beat the big guy, because that was the big promise of jiu-jitsu, of martial arts generally speaking, that it is techniques that allows the smaller, weaker person to defeat the larger, stronger person. And it wasn't working out that way in the gym. I'm getting squished by the big guys. So YouTube was fairly new at the time, and I went to YouTube and I looked up every existing YouTube video of a big guy being defeated by a small guy in any combat sport at all. And there was one grappling match between, and most of them were very much wish fulfillment fantasy. But
Yeah.
one that really changed my mind about how to train, it was Ricardo Almeida versus Josh Barnett. They're both very athletic people. But Josh Barnett is much bigger than Ricardo Almeida. Ricardo Almeida won the match, but he didn't win it the way I wanted him to. I wanted him to use some special little magic technique to make the big guy tap out. He didn't. Josh Barnett,
Mhm.
beastly big dude, takes the smaller guy down, and Ricardo Almeida does everything in his power to get off of the bottom. So he cannot be squished, so he's not bearing his opponent's weight. And I realized that's an incredibly good strategy, but I don't like it because it takes effort. I don't want to use that much effort. And then I realized I'm going to have to. I can't
Yeah.
let the big guy squish me. Can't let the big guy control your head. Can't let the big guy put his weight on you.
Yes. There was actually I had a problem looking back on it when I was in the MMA and self defense club. A lot of times, like the new small, weak women kind of thing, were taught how to fight from the bottom would be like the first things they learned, because the assumption was like you're going to end up on the bottom. But then like I look back on that later, I'm like, if you're the smaller and weaker person and you immediately end up on the bottom as soon as the fight starts, you're gonna lose. Like it's over. You're almost certainly gonna lose. The only way you're gonna win is if they're good enough to get on top of you reliably. They're good enough to beat you. Sorry. And the only reliable thing to do is like you have to fight for position. And if they're a bigger, stronger person and they can't even take you down, now you have a chance.
Yeah, exactly. When I opened up my first gym, it was back in the US. I opened up this small gym and some guys came and trained with me. I trained some fighters. It was a good time. But then this giant dude, he weighed like 425 pounds, something like that. And at the time, I only weighed like 155. I'm like 250 now, but I walked around like 155 at that time in my life. And this giant dude is like, so teach me some jiu-jitsu. I was like, okay. Yeah, so here's the guard. We start rolling from my guard, and he just leans forward, puts his weight on me, and crushes me so hard it breaks one of my ribs. And I was like, well, dang, I need a different strategy. This one clearly isn't working. Because what I'm doing is not the strategy for the smaller, weaker opponent to beat the larger, stronger guy.
Yep.
What I did was foolish. What I did was dumb. What I did didn't work. And yet it's what so many people teach you to do. So let's not do that anymore.
Yeah. I have noticed that people that are 250 pounds don't feel that big anymore when I'm in top mount.
Yes.
Yeah.
When you're on top, it's like they get a lot smaller. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So like my goal is just get there and the rest will take care of itself.
I got to say, though, now that I weigh, how much do I'm about 215 pounds right now. Before COVID,
Okay.
I was like 235. When you weigh 235 pounds, guys who weigh 250 pounds weigh a lot less.
Yeah.
At least it feels like it. So bulking for the win.
When you're an actual heavyweight, I imagine other heavyweights wouldn't be quite as bad.
Oh, man. And that's another reason I got accused of taking steroids. It's weird. I got accused of taking steroids when I started bulking up. And people would constantly ask me, what are you taking, Ramsey? You never used to be this big. You used to be, a featherweight dude. What's happening? What are you taking? Food. More food. That's what I'm taking. Yeah. Harry's got it right. Food. Exactly.
I feel like that's the ultimate compliment. Like, because the classic insult in jiu-jitsu of, oh, you're so strong. I love that now. I love, like, when people say, like, did you wrestle in high school? That's the ultimate compliment to me. So I want people to accuse me of taking something. That's my goal. My goal is to make everyone think I'm on steroids. It has not happened, but, I'm trying. I have this magic thing where, for some reason, when I'm, like, wearing a shirt, no one can tell I'm in shape. It's like, it's a weird magic thing. I've had people, like, they'll know me for forever, and then they'll finally see me with my shirt off. They're like, "You have abs. Where did those come from?"
Visible
Like,
muscle insertions. What?
Yeah, and people that like roll with me can feel like, oh, this guy's in shape. He's not tired yet. But people that just like know me casually have no idea. It's the weirdest thing.
Watch you on YouTube.
Yeah. People on YouTube, like, that's driving the hateful comments on YouTube. They're like, who is this child? I bet he can't even do a push-up kind of deal.
Do you get challenged to fights on YouTube? Do people like challenge you to fights through the YouTube comments?
What's not very often, what's actually way more common is they tell me to fight other people. I'm like, that proves you scared of me. Like, they'll tell me, like with KC Fighting Method, when I criticize them, I was like, well, how about you challenge the masters of KC Fighting Method to a fight? I'm like, no. Why would I? That's an old man. I don't want to beat up a 50-year-old man. Like, what does that prove?
Yeah. Oh man. I've
Yeah,
made a
they'll
few
tell me to fight
videos
other people.
where I got comments like that debunking like fake Tai Chi nerds.
Yeah.
One in particular. There's this dude, and he's got his training partner there standing, being very compliant, and he literally pushes him down a hill and claims it's because of his chi powers that the guy moved. I'm like, he's standing on an incline, like a 45-degree incline. You literally pushed him down a hill. That's not magic. I point this out in a video, and people are like, "Well, why don't you go fight him?" Like, how gullible are you, man? It's like, man,
Like what a waste of my time. Do you
exactly.
do you get more pushback on debunking the Tai Chi stuff? Like because you're in China, do you get stuff from Chinese people on that? Or are you
No,
insulated enough you don't notice it?
no, it's not Chinese people. It's usually Americans and Europeans who accuse me of hating Chinese culture. They don't listen to a word I say. I say, look, what these idiots are doing is nothing like real Tai Chi. I've seen the real thing. I've trained with a legit master of Tai Chi Chuan. I know what Tai Chi is. I know what Tai Chi Jin, Tai Chi Chuan is, and this is how I know what the fake stuff is because I've seen the real thing. And also, I'm an intelligent human being who knows the difference between pushing a man down a hill and a legit fighting technique. I mean, I guess pushing a guy down a hill could be a legit fighting technique, but it's not magic, right?
Mhm.
And then they come up, is straw man the right word? No, it's not. Like a false
Tell me
equivalent.
the thing and I'll tell you the fallacy.
Okay, where I say essentially this isn't real Tai Chi. It's not real Chinese martial arts they're doing. The response, why do you hate Chinese martial arts? Like,
That would be a straw man, but
okay,
just a really blatant straw man.
yes, I get that all the time. If you make any critique of anybody cosplaying as an Asian, they will respond with, why do you hate traditional martial arts? Like,
Yeah.
another thing,
And
yeah.
oh, go ahead. Yeah, there's a weird thing on that because like one, obviously you don't hate Chinese martial arts, duh, and there are some Chinese martial arts that are quite good. Um, but at the same time, like you can look at the cultural aspect of, hey, trying to base a martial art on something like Confucius philosophy does not give you good practical results. It gives
Mm.
you Confucius philosophy disguised as a martial art. Like
Yep.
there are weirdly enough, like there are cultural aspects to this, which is why that East Asians have some good martial arts and then they have 1,000 bad ones. Because and Western philosophy doesn't have that because anytime like we have anything, we're like, we'll make it more actiony, punch someone in the face with it. And the Western philosophy gets whittled down where we don't have we don't have a larger number of effective martial arts than other cultures. We just don't have those same like woo-woo traditional martial arts. All those woo-woo traditional martial arts got imported
You
to
know what we
us and
probably have in the
then got
West?
perpetuated. What'd you say?
In the West, particularly in America, there are probably more people who train to fight, right? Not people who train in
Mhm.
various martial arts, but people who train to fight for real, I would say.
Yeah.
In China, for example, professional fighters are generally drawn from sports universities, and there is a very limited number of people who make it into sports universities. Like most MMA fighters in China come from a Sanda background. To be a Sanda fighter, you have to be accepted into the sports university program as a child, and basically they're the guys aren't who don't do the forms pretty enough to major in Taolu in the forms, right? And so they
Mhm.
they get shifted into the Sanda program, and people get cut from that program routinely. And so the idea is only the best of the best make it to the top. And so you've got guys like say Elong. He's famous for cosplaying as a Shaolin monk for entering for his ring
Yeah,
entrances,
I
and
know that
people
guy.
believed he actually was a Shaolin monk, and he became famous because of that. He was in the Sports University Sanda program at Shanghai University of Sport. He got cut from the program, and then he was like, "Well, heck, what do I do?" all I know how to do is fight, and I got cut from the program, which is why he developed the whole monk motif to get some attention, and it worked, and he was able to make a living off of that.
Mhm.
But most people, again, in China, it's we don't have this broad talent pool to draw from. There are, in the entire country, 1.4 billion people, about 10,000 people in the sport university system doing Sanda. Okay, about 10,000. That's a tiny drop in the bucket. How
Yeah.
many Americans do you think, would you estimate, train at a combat sports gym, at an MMA gym, a Jiu-Jitsu gym, a Muay Thai gym,
More than
etc.?
10,000.
Yeah,
More than 10,000, which as a percentage of our population is even way, way higher.
yeah, probably a
Yeah.
lot more. Oh, sweet, we got a
Yeah.
super chat question. Spivvy Forever says, do you guys think a big MMA-like competition without gloves and with ground kicks would help popularize the functional aspects of real Tai Chi, Mantis, etc., with grabbing and steady feet? Okay, so basically, if we took a bunch of kung fu nerds and put them in an MMA-like competition without gloves, and soccer kicks are legal, what happens?
Not good things for the Tai Chi nerds. I'm really sorry. The MMA guys are still going to be the successful ones in that.
But we don't invite
nothing.
them. We don't invite them. Just the kung fu nerds. I'm guessing.
Just okay. Well, if it's made up of exclusively kung fu nerds, then a kung fu nerd will win. But that's about the only way that you're going to get a kung fu nerd to win.
But I guess let's look at this a different way. If we start a competition where we invite only kung fu guys, and I think this is kind of what Karate Combat tried to do. They invited a bunch of karate guys, had a rule set that would highlight karate techniques, and then it just kind of ended up looking like discount MMA at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
If you did a similar thing and had like kung fu combat, kind of like Karate Combat, and had I don't know, a rule set to distinguish it from MMA, like this guy's suggesting no gloves, soccer kicks on the ground.
Yeah, and he's saying not Tai Chi versus MMA, but MMA guys who can grab more. I don't think, like, if you take away the gloves and allow ground kicks and whatnot, I don't think that would let you grab more. You can still grab plenty because, like, you've got the MMA gloves, you can grab with them fairly well.
Yeah.
So it's really a question of, like, if you legalize ground kicks and soccer kicks and things like that, and you take away with the gloves, how much would that change the sport? And it would change it, but it would not reinvent it. It would still be basically the same sport. The biggest thing is if you took away the gloves, there would be more doctor stoppages because of cuts. That would be probably the biggest noticeable difference is more blood.
I think there would probably be more grappling without the gloves. Yeah, there's more likelihood you'll open up some cuts and so on. But at the same time, I think people barehanded, no wraps, will be more reluctant to punch and more likely to grapple. I don't know about the kung fu nerds.
Conventional wisdom. That's the conventional wisdom is that you're not going to punch without the gloves. But partly because, like, if you punch with the same force, yeah, you're probably going to hurt your hand. But, like, to open up cuts on someone and to, like, give them black eyes when you've got bare knuckles, you can punch stupid light and mess up their face surprisingly quickly. And if you can make that adaptation of where you just start punching light, you might even end up throwing more punches just because, like, you're doing them so light, you can just kind of and just keep touching them and just try and create cuts and create swelling on their face to the point where, like, the doctor's going to stop it.
Yeah, I think probably the best example of what we're talking about right here would be boxing from before 1920. And we have pitifully little footage of this, but we do have some. Like Jack Johnson's fights are well documented before 1920. And the rules of boxing were different. They did allow fighters to clinch for an extended period of time. Dirty boxing, to some extent, was allowed. You could clinch and strike. And so, if you watch Jack Johnson's fights, they would tie up, they would clinch, then they would pummel, make an opening, hit, tie up again, pummel, hit, tie up, hit, tie up, hit, etc. And fights would go on for extended periods of time using this type of strategy. And if you watch these fights today, you're like, that doesn't look like boxing. It doesn't look anything like modern boxing. But at the same time, if you watch some, you can see a couple of like super old kung fu fights that were filmed like around the same time. I don't remember if it's Hong Kong or mainland China or wherever, but they have these guys who are supposedly masters of whatever Chinese martial art that they do. They're not wearing gloves. They're like swinging hammer fists and stuff at each other, and then they tie up for a while. They sneak in a punch here and there. It's not as artful, I would say, as Jack Johnson's work, but it's kind of a similar strategy. It's not big, heavy, reckless punches. It's make an opening, hit something that isn't going to injure you with amount of force that is sustainable, and then repeat. So maybe we would see that.
Yeah. And actually, like, this is one of a good examples, because something that bothers me is all the people that say, like, oh, without gloves, you can't throw punches. You used to palm strike in the street. Punches are stupid. Like, not realizing that for most of history, all of our sort of boxing contests were bare knuckle. People threw punches. Anytime you, like, got people into a contest and said, figure out the best way to beat each other up with no equipment, they made fists all the time. So, like, this, and before the modern,
you made a video about this.
Yeah,
you made a video about this.
It was my most popular video.
I commented on that video, and that comment keeps getting comments. I get notifications every day that somebody commented on my comment on your video where I said something along the lines of, almost invariably, in a fight, the guy who punches more wins.
Yes.
Gloves, no gloves, street fight, sport fight, etc.
Yeah. The reason that got so many replies recently is because a few months ago, that video decided to go absolutely ballistic. It's currently right near like 780,000 views, which means it gained about 770,000 views in the past few months.
Oh, wow. It has gone viral.
It's pretty much leveled off now. But yeah, that shot up out of nowhere, because it was like over a year old by the time it shot up, but it started going absolutely ballistic, and I got a bunch of subscribers, and that was really cool.
Awesome. Congratulations. Yeah. I noticed the videos that I want to go viral don't. The videos I don't actually want people to watch because they kind of suck are the ones people keep looking at. I don't understand it.
Yeah. I'm fine with that one going viral. Like, I think it's a good video, but you're right. Like, the videos you really want to go viral or the videos you feel like you did really well. Like, anytime I talk to another martial arts YouTuber, like a martial arts person, every single time they bring up your wall wrestling video was great. Because it was, and I'm proud of it.
It
did fine.
People should watch that video.
Yeah, the video did fine. Like, it didn't do badly, but also, like, that's the one thing where every martial artist that does MMA season is like, that is correct, and everyone needs to hear it, and only some people have heard it.
Meanwhile, the casuals are like, skip.
Yeah.
Where's the one I can be angry at and shout authoritatively?
Yeah, I have noticed people very much watch for my personality, which is kind of freeing, because it means I can make content or whatever I want. Because I was talking to the Fight Dialogue. I actually did a podcast with him, which I did earlier, but it has not come out yet. And he was asking, like, I have such disparate content. And then I even did the Dave Grossman video, which was like 12 steps removed from a lot of my other content. And I still get views. And when he tries to branch out on his content, the algorithm just smacks him on the head.
Yeah.
And I said, like, a big reason is because from the get-go, I have been in front of the camera, and I have very much, like, I have forced my personality through the camera. So yeah, people kind of watch for the information, but the people that click on all of my videos are not just watching. They don't click on video because of the information. They click on every video because of me, because they like seeing me, because they think I'm entertaining. And that means that I can basically make whatever I want, and they're clicking for me either way.
It's a trap a lot of YouTubers fall into of feeling forced into a very specific niche that they don't always want to represent. I had a conversation with Icy Mike when I was in Australia, and I'm going to paraphrase what he said because I don't remember exactly what it was. But he basically said, dude, I kind of envy you because you're in a position where you can post whatever you want. And, you know, even though your videos generally don't get as many views as mine, you are not afraid of the algorithm. You can post some social commentary thing. You can post a technique video. You can post a video with your kids. I can't do that. I have to do this very oddly specific thing or the algorithm punishes me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm in a position where YouTube is like, I've been doing YouTube videos for 16 years, but it's a hobby. It's not my job. Like if I relied on YouTube for my job, boy, my family would be in trouble, dude. We would be,
True.
that would suck. It's like less than minimum wage in the 90s, man. But there are a lot of guys who do, and they can't afford to deviate from the formula. And it's like, I kind of feel bad for them, to be honest. It's like, I'm great. Your content's doing great. Your channel is doing great. And at the same time, there's so much more they want to say, but they can't.
Yeah. And that's one of the freeing aspects of like, I have never made a video or not made a video or altered a video because of popularity, because of whether or not I think it will be popular. There's some videos where I'm making where I'm like, this one might be more popular than others. But that thought does not inform what the video is. I'm going to make the videos I'm going to make. And if it gets 5 views, I would have made it. And if it gets 12 million views, I would have made it the exact same way. I mean, there are certain things like production quality. Yeah, I'm doing my best to make that better. But I'm doing my best. But
That's
I don't
awesome,
choose topics. Yeah, I don't choose topics based on popularity. And I see a lot of YouTubers do. Like a lot of guys that I like, they'll come out with a video and I'm like, that video title looks like it was designed by a committee and it gets like barely any views. And I'm like, the reason it's not getting any views is because everyone's already made that video. Like your video was written by a committee kind of deal and your soul's not in it. Like who would watch this video?
That works for certain genres of YouTubers, like people who review films. Everybody will make a video about the same movie that just came out because the movie just came out. Right? It doesn't work in the martial arts YouTube sector where everybody makes a video about the Superman punch at the same time. It's not going to happen. It's not going to work out that way.
Well, I got a comment the other day that was basically asking like, hey, are you going to make the ranking martial arts video that every other martial arts YouTuber has made?
I hate that.
Yeah, I know.
And I was in one of those once and I hated it.
I responded, no, I'm not, because every martial arts YouTuber has made it. What the flip am I going to add to that? What I am thinking about is I might rank it by region, like best, like ranking English martial arts, ranking American martial arts, ranking Chinese martial arts.
Yeah.
Because that would allow me to do something slightly different and pull out a bunch of niche martial arts that might only be in like small communities and whatnot, and also include those. Because if I try and categorize all martial arts in the world, that's hundreds of them. That's a horrendously long video. But if I break it down by country, better. And I tried to do this. I tried to do that for ranking English martial arts or UK martial arts, and I did it with the channel English martial arts. And
cool.
I had technical problems, and the video didn't come out well, and it got screwed up. I know it freaking sucks because I wanted that video to come out.
That sucks. I like that, dude. I like the English martial arts channel. I'm subscribed. If you're watching and you don't know that one, it's a good channel.
Yes, it is a good channel.
Good information.
It's also super weird because like when I barely started YouTube, I was watching that channel, and it was a really good eclectic channel, and he reached out to me and we connected and we did the thing that unfortunately I was not able to publish, which I feel terrible about. And I recently got to the point where I now have a higher subscriber count than him, and it feels wrong somehow.
Yeah.
Like, it feels like he
Like it
should
should be the
have,
other way.
yeah, he should have more subscribers than me. What's going
It's like
on? This feels
survivor's
weird.
guilt.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like survivor's guilt,
Oh man.
basically. Which, and it's also weird because like I got a ton more subscribers recently. Like I more than doubled my subscriber count because the bare knuckle punches video blew up,
Yeah.
and my views on each new video went up by like 20%. I'm like, I don't like this. I don't like how that works. I want this to scale linearly.
Yeah. You want it to progress for the right reasons, right? You know, I hate
Yeah.
tier lists. I hate tier lists so much that I want to make a tier list video about the worst tier lists on YouTube.
That would
Not
be
even
so
anything
good.
martial arts related, just a tier list of bad tier lists, man. I'm going to make that video.
I want to be in that video. That's such a good idea.
Let's do it.
Their
Let's do it.
definitive martial arts
Let's
tier
plan
list.
it.
Tier list.
Let's plan it. I don't know how it's gonna. I'll make some notes. You make some notes. We'll email back and forth. Let's do it.
We're just gonna find as many tier lists as we can, and then we're gonna rank them on the dumbest, most arbitrary reasons we can possibly think of.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Look forward to that one, folks at home. The tier list of tier lists.
Oh, I'm so mad that I didn't think about that first. I should have. That's just
It's
the
all
kind
right.
of joke
It'll
I
be a
would make.
collaboration.
We took it.
We
Yes,
can put it
that would
up
be
on both
awesome.
channels if you want.
Yeah. I am thinking about making like the region specific tier list though, just because like that's something slightly different.
Yeah.
But the hardest part is I think when I did it with English martial arts, our criteria was we're ranking it in how good is it at what it is trying to do. So like if it claims to be for self-defense, then we judge how good it is at self-defense. If it is for a combat, and if it's for a combat sport, we have to look at it as how good is it at like actual fighting other martial arts, because obviously a combat sport is going to be the best at its combat sport. That's kind of a given. It's always going to be perfect for its combat sport. And if it's a military martial art, how good is it for the military? Kind of things like that. So, because I think we couldn't come up with a better way to rank them than that, because we have to put them all in their own context.
Yeah, because if you put them all like, which one's the best for the streets? It's like, that's problematic.
Yeah, because also like some of them, like military martial arts, they're not made for the street. They're made for you to be carrying multiple weapons on you at all times and be traveling in a squad.
And also made for the worst case scenario in a military situation. If for whatever reason you don't have your sidearm ready, it's a nuanced discussion. But the tier list of tier lists, man, I'm looking forward to that one.
No, that'll be good. That'll be good.
Okay, I'm gonna have to call it a day. It's been a great discussion with you. Thank you so much for coming here, Jake. Anybody you want to shout out? Where can they find you for the people who don't already subscribe?
You guys, you should all be subscribed, obviously. You can find me over at Armchair Violence, where I tackle martial arts, but also all things violence, and I do it from a very top-down theoretical perspective, which not many other people do.
Awesome. All right, Jake, thank you so much. Hope to talk to you again about tier lists.
Thank you for having me. It's been awesome, and now at 1 a.m. I start getting ready for bed.
And for the folks at home, thanks for watching. Now get out there and train.